Chapter 641. In fact, when Xianxia had used her divine sense to scan the stone pillar in the middle of the cold pond, she had already scanned the other places in the cold pond. However, Xianxia didn't know how to use the water escape technique, and her divine sense didn't have any special abilities in the water. Moreover, the water in this cold pond was abnormally cold. Even her divine sense could only immerse into the water for about 1 foot, so it was impossible to discover any abnormalities. Of course, Xianxia wouldn't rashly fly to the middle of the cold pond without making any preparations. But when the strange thing in the cold pond flew out, it still gave Xianxia a shock. In her divine sense, a long black snake which was twice as big as the 5-colored snake that she saw in the orchid rainforest previously, and its speed was also twice as fast as the 5-colored snake. It bit towards Xianxia's leg. The most bizarre thing was that on the head of this long snake, there was a huge sarcoma. On both sides of the thick snake body, there were 4 fleshy wings which were the same as the previous bat's wings. Seeing the strange snake, Xianxia's heart skipped a beat. Her body instantly turned and flew towards the upper right swiftly. But that strange snake missed its target, and its body didn't fall into the cold pond normally. Instead, its tail slapped the water surface and the 4 wings on its body flapped. It changed its direction extremely agilely and chased after Xianxia's figure. Now that Xianxia was proficient in using the Imperial Wind technique, she could stay in the air for a long time, so she wasn't nervous. Instead, she took out the dream-chasing sword from her bosom and threw it into the air. She made a gesture and directly pierced towards the 7 inches of the strange snake. When the strange snake saw this, it hesitated slightly but still moved its body, trying to avoid the small sword. Xianxia was familiar with the dream-weaving swordplay, and after a few rounds, she found a flaw and struck the strange snake 7 inches from the side. But before Xianxia could rejoice, the strange snake's head shook and the tip of the small sword actually slid off the strange snake's body without hurting it at all. Xianxia was even more shocked. Although this dream-chasing sword wasn't too sharp, the force behind the stab was still very impressive. It was actually easily dealt with by this strange snake. Could it be that there was some mystery on this snake's skin? Hence, Xianxia made a series of gestures and controlled the small sword to attack like a violent storm. Not long later, it hit the strange snake several times, but every time, it was the same. That strange snake only needed to shake slightly and it was able to dissipate the force of the small sword, causing the dream-chasing sword to be unable to achieve any effect. Seeing that the small sword wasn't effective, Xianxia could only keep it and took out the jade water sword. Injecting vital qi, it flashed out another 3 feet sword ray. When that strange snake saw the brilliance of the sword ray, it seemed to be a little afraid and hesitated slightly when it attacked. Xianxia was elated when she saw this and slashed towards the strange snake's head. The strange snake was also agile and easily dodged the attack. Xianxia was a little annoyed. She didn't know many sword techniques, and the most she was familiar with was the few nameless swordplay that Elder Yu had taught her. Hence, she didn't care about anything else and brandished her sword to slash. Although the nameless swordplay was used as a flying sword, but after some modifications, it could still be used. After fighting for a while, Xianxia's sword avoided the strange snake's body. A clang sound was heard and there were actually some sparks on the strange snake's body. Even so, there wasn't a single mark left on the black snake's skin. That strange snake was sent flying to the other side of the cold pond by Xianxia's sword. It shook its huge snake head and there was a hint of mockery in its eyes. The snake that wasn't in the water swung its body and swam towards Xianxia's side. Xianxia slashed the strange snake away with his sword, but his body landed on the edge of the cold pool. Seeing that the strange snake was still unharmed, his heart skipped a beat. He thought to himself, how can this strange snake be so resistant? However, when Xianxia looked at the pool of water that was so dark that his divine sense could not penetrate it and was overflowing with cold qi, he came to a realization. This pool of water was so strange that he did not know how many strange things there were in it. This strange snake had lived in the cold pool for an unknown number of years, and its skin was immersed in the pool all day long. It would be strange if there was nothing strange about it. However, if she wanted to obtain the strange item in the stone bowl at the center of the cold pond, this strange snake would be the first to be dealt with. She couldn't use the jade water sword and chasing dream, and she didn't bring the great wisdom sword with her. What should she do? While she was thinking, the strange snake had already swam over from the water. When it saw that Xianxia seemed to be angry from embarrassment, It opened its mouth and flicked its red tongue. Then, it flew out from the water and bit towards Zhang Xiaohua's chest. Without hesitation, Zhang Xiaohua took out a few jade talismans that were like small ingots and threw them at the strange snake's surroundings. Just like how she attacked the large bat earlier, a few wisps of red flames instantly burned the strange snake's body. The flames seemed to be effective against the strange snake. The strange snake felt a wave of pain and swayed its body a few times. However, the flames refused to be extinguished. Hence, it plunged its head downwards and its entire body was submerged in the water. With a sizzling sound, the flames that had always worked were extinguished by the water. Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head. It was common knowledge that water could subdue fire. She originally thought that the flames in her jade talismans would be of some use. However, the water in the cold pond was even more powerful. These few ingots could be considered to have been wasted. At this moment, the strange snake swam over again. It seemed to be even more unscrupulous. Ayo! Zhang Xiaohua suddenly slapped her forehead and said to herself, I forgot that I had just refined a dragon binding ring. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua could not be blamed. This was an era where martial arts flourished. Celestial artifacts and the like could not be used. Zhang Xiaohua's usual method of facing enemies was to use her small sword and fists. At the very least, she would throw out the ingot's jade talismans. This was something that she had never used before. At this moment, the strange snake flew over again. Zhang Xiaohua smiled as she took out the pair of dragon binding rings from her money pouch. She casually threw them into the air, then formed a seal and hit the jade bracelets. After receiving Zhang Xiaohua's true energy, the jade bracelets enlarged with a "hu" sound. Then, under Zhang Xiaohua's command, they flew towards the strange snake. When the strange snake saw the jade bracelets suddenly enlarged, it seemed to be taken aback. When it saw the jade bracelets flying over, it hurriedly dodged. Unfortunately, with Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense, there was no way it could dodge. After dodging a few times, the jade bracelets caught on its head. The strange snake struggled with all its might, sinking its head into the water. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and waved her hand. The dragon binding ring immediately flew out from the cold pond, dragging the strange snake to the open space beside Zhang Xiaohua. The strange snake was more than 3 feet long. Under the brilliance of the luminous pearl, its dark snake skin reflected a faint light. Although it was suspended in the air, it still twisted its body and continued to struggle. However, the dragon binding ring seemed to be attached to the snake's body. No matter how it twisted, it could not move an inch. As it neared, the strange snake's eyes flashed with hatred. It opened its mouth and with a hiss sound, a black fragrant venom was sprayed towards Zhang Xiaohua's face. Before the venom even reached her body, Zhang Xiaohua felt a little dizzy just by smelling it. Needless to say, it was extremely poisonous. The strange snake was at its wit's end. When it spat out the venom, Zhang Xiaohua easily dodged it. The sarcoma on the strange snake's head dimmed and it seemed to have shrunk quite a bit. Furthermore, the strange snake also stopped struggling and looked haggard. After dodging the venom, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She formed a seal with her right hand and hit the venom that had yet to fall to the ground. The venom immediately condensed into a pitch-black pearl and flew in front of Zhang Xiaohua's eyes. Didn't the jade slip in her belt mention something about a poison dragon pill? Although she did not know what it was used for, it should be the venom of the snake. If this strange snake's venom could not be considered venomous, then there was nothing in this world that could be considered venomous. Carefully taking out a jade bottle from her bosom, Zhang Xiaohua kept the venom inside. She then formed a seal at the mouth of the bottle and sealed it firmly. Only then did she keep it in her money pouch. Looking at the dispirited strange snake lying on the ground, Zhang Xiaohua flew up again and headed straight for the stone bowl. This time, there was no accident. It seemed that there was only the strange snake in this cold pool. Zhang Xiaohua stood there in midair and took out a jade bottle from her bosom. The seal in her right hand continuously formed a seal on the lotion in the stone bowl. Not long after, the lotion gradually condensed together and formed a fist-sized sphere. However, Zhang Xiaohua was still not satisfied. She pointed her finger and the drop that was still stuck on the huge stone pillar flew up and merged into the sphere of lotion. At this point, the entire stone bowl could not be considered to have a single drop left. Subsequently, Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and pointed at the jade bottle in her hand. The lotion directly turned into a thin thread and entered the jade bottle. Zhang Xiaohua proudly placed a seal on the jade bottle and kept it in her money pouch. She thought to herself, this celestial technique is indeed magical. Even such a simple seal is meticulously crafted. If I were to go back to ancient times, I would be comparable to the oil seller described in the books. Next, it was time to collect the 2 fruits on the black and white vines. These strange fruits were not recorded in the 100 Herb Compendium, let alone Zhang Xiaohua, who knew what they were used for. However, she was a little embarrassed. Should she put the 2 fruits together? Or separately? Sigh, it had to be said that Zhang Xiaohua was a little cocky. Taking out a jade box from her bosom, Zhang Xiaohua cast a spell on the black fruit. With a wave of her hand, the fruit flew straight into the jade box. However, the moment the black fruit left the black and white vine, the black color on the vine immediately faded, and the entire vine turned white. The white color only lasted for a moment, and it turned into a dead gray color. What was even more bizarre was that the white fruit also fell from the vine, falling straight into the pitch-black cold pond. In the open space far away, the strange snake that was crawling on the ground actually had a look of helplessness and hatred in its eyes. Chapter 642. In the Far East, 2 women, one in green and one in purple, were using their qinggong to travel into the depths of the mountain range. The scenery in this mountain range was different from that of the birch forest. The trees were short, the water was flowing freely, and there were many springs in the mountains. Moreover, if Zhang Xiaohua was here, she would definitely be able to sense that the origin energy here was much denser than that of the birch forest. While the 2 women were walking, the leading green-clothed woman suddenly frowned under her veil and stopped. The purple-clothed woman, who was following closely behind, also stopped in her tracks. However, the woman in front had stopped abruptly. Due to inertia, she continued to rush forward. The woman in green grabbed the woman in purple and stopped her. She said in a low voice, "Xianxia, listen. Is there any sound?" The woman in purple was Xianxia. She was puzzled and listened for a moment before she shook her head. "Senior Sister Chen, I don't hear anything." Chen smiled and said proudly, "The sound is still hundreds of feet away. Of course you can't hear it." This. Xianxia almost fainted from anger. She said in a fit of pique, "Senior Sister Chen, since you know I can't hear it, why are you still making fun of me?" "Good junior sister. Don't be anxious." Chen smiled. "This orchid twilight is really boring. It's just the 2 of us running around. The other junior sisters are nowhere to be seen. It's really unpleasant to talk about. After searching for a long time, we didn't find anything good. They must have taken it first." Xianxia covered her mouth and laughed. "Senior Sister Chen is being greedy. Didn't you find 200-year-old snow lotuses on a steep cliff when you were tracking the golden eagle? Although I don't understand, seeing the golden eagle risking its life, it should be at least 300 years old. Isn't it a treasure? Hee hee." Chen couldn't hide the smile on her face. Although the snow lotus is good, it's inferior to the 10,000-year stalactite. It's not worth mentioning. The stalactite was taken by you, and you still have the nerve to say you didn't find anything good. Xianxia was completely defeated by Chen and asked helplessly, "Who would complain about having too many good things? It's just a commonplace, and all of them have been visited by our senior sisters in the past. How could they possibly leave behind something that caught our eye? Last time, the heaven stalactite was mysteriously led by you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have believed you this time. You actually found such a strange place?" Just as they were talking, a dark cloud appeared in the distance and was flying towards them. Moreover, a loud buzzing sound was also heard. When Xianxia heard it, she looked up and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. That dark cloud was formed by thousands of fist-sized wild bees. Xianxia pulled Chen and shouted, "Senior Sister Chen, did you just hear the voice of this wasp?" Seeing this, Chen's expression also changed. He said awkwardly, It was this buzzing sound. I was just talking to you and forgot. I'm really sorry." Seeing Chen still apologizing, Xianxia became anxious. She grabbed Chen and turned to run. Chen followed closely behind, but not long after, the buzzing sound became louder and the distance between them was shortened. At this time, Chen Chen came to his senses and grabbed Xia's arm. He used his qigong and rushed in another direction. The pursuing dark wasp also changed its direction and chased after him relentlessly. Although Chen Chen's qigong was superb, with Xia, his speed was a bit slower. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the wasp had caught up again. Chen Chen turned his head slightly and said anxiously, "Junior sister Xia, you brought us to the wrong place this time. Where is this?" First the blood toad, then the illusion butterfly, then the flying leopard, and now the wasp. These thousands of wasps are something that even our incense cult's consecrators don't dare to underestimate. How can we be a match for them? I was greedy and wanted to get some heavenly treasures like the heaven stalactite. This time, we're in trouble. Xia had no choice but to urge. Senior Sister Chen, don't blame him. If you don't want to be stung by the wasp and become a swollen, ugly corpse, then escape is more important. Hey, look, there's a canyon over there. See if there's a place to hide. At this time, Chen Chen was in a panic and flew in the direction Xia pointed. Speaking of which, it was quite dangerous. The hornet swarm was closely behind them and the few hornets in front were only a foot away from them. However, at this moment, Chen Chen and Xia arrived at the entrance of the canyon. They did not have time to think carefully and rushed in, then went further in to find a place to hide. The wasp swarm that was chasing them at high speed circled around the mouth of the canyon and didn't fly further in. Then they turned around and went back. At the mouth of the canyon, Chen Chen and Xia's figures disappeared. Further north of the Yulon Prairie was an area overgrown with vegetation. There was also a group of disciples, both male and female. Some of them were carefully picking herbs on the ground, while others held swords and sabers, guarding the carriage. At this time, a slender woman with picturesque features seemed to have seen something and shouted, "Junior brother, come here, there's good stuff here." Not far away, a tall man with an imposing temperament raised his head and said with a smile, "Senior sister, this Yulon Grand Canyon is full of good stuff. Which one do you want me to see?" As he spoke, he walked over with large strides. When he saw the place the woman was pointing at, he couldn't help but be surprised. Cold light grass. This is indeed a good thing. I heard that it's one of the main ingredients used by the inner disciples to refine the Yuhuandan pill. However, this herb doesn't grow in cold places. How can it appear here? The woman mocked. You always like to get to the bottom of things. Now is not the time for you to study it. It's more important to pick it quickly. The man looked at the woman with a smile. He took a small medicine shovel and shoveled the cold light grass on the ground. At the same time, far away in the cold cave, Xianxia was also standing next to the cold pond. She made a hand seal and attacked the various cold spiritual herbs growing on the edge of the cold pond. She carefully picked them one by one and put them into the jade box she prepared in advance. Although this matter was boring, Xianxia did it carefully. While putting the restriction into the jade box, she recalled the loss she almost suffered because of her carelessness. Just now, when Xianxia picked the black fruit and was about to put it into the jade box, she never thought that the white fruit would fall at the same time as the black fruit. In a moment of carelessness, the fruit fell into the cold pond. Needless to say, as long as the fruit fell into the cold pond, even if it wasn't frozen, its medicinal properties would be affected. Therefore, when Xianxia saw the white fruit fall, her face immediately changed. She couldn't care about controlling the black fruit that was slowly flying over. She quickly made a hand seal and attacked the white fruit that was falling rapidly from the sky. Xianxia was lucky. Just as the white fruit was about to fall into the cold pond, the hand seal hit the white fruit. A colorless light shield appeared on the fruit. Following Xianxia's hand seal, it flew directly towards the jade box in Xianxia's hand. When the white fruit flew over, the black fruit was already at the edge of the jade box. However, the white fruit seemed to be attracted by the black fruit and accelerated towards the jade box. No matter how Xianxia tried to control it, she couldn't slow it down. When the black fruit fell into the jade box, the white fruit also fell into the jade box at the same time. After putting the black and white fruits into the jade box, Xianxia reached out his hand to take out another jade box. He wanted to store the two fruits separately. However, at this moment, the two fruits seemed to be attracted to each other. They flew up separately and collided with each other in the jade box. Ayo, what's going on? Xianxia asked curiously. Her hand that was about to take out the money bag stopped. In her divine sense, the two black and white fruits collided with each other and spun rapidly. It actually brought about a change in the surrounding yuan qi of heaven and earth. The cold air from the cold pond and the icy cold yuan qi in the surroundings seemed to be absorbed into the rotating black and white fruits. Xianxia carefully held the jade box with both hands and stared dumbfoundedly at the strange changes that had happened to the two fruits in the jade box. Only after the time it took to eat a meal did the black and white fruits gradually stop. At this time, the surrounding heaven and earth yuan qi had almost been completely absorbed, and even the cold qi in the cold pond had temporarily stopped emitting. When Xianxia looked again, he could not help but be shocked. The two black and white fruits had already merged into one, and each of them looked like a fish. The two fish were connected head to tail, and in the middle of the black fish was a white dot, and in the middle of the white fish was a black dot. All of this was actually the same process as when the 8 trigrams purple gold furnace was refining pills, and the process of refining pills was no different. What is this thing? Xianxia sent her divine sense in, but it was immediately blocked outside by the black and white fruits. She could not enter at all. After thinking for a moment, Xianxia solemnly closed the jade box and cast the most powerful restriction on it. Then she carefully kept it. Then she turned around to look at the main purpose of her visit today. Not long after, Xianxia had already picked all the spiritual herbs beside the cold pond. These spiritual herbs had grown for so long and were excellent ingredients for refining elixirs. Of course, Xianxia was not worried that the ice soul grass and cold light grass here would disappear in the future. This immortal herb picking technique was very mysterious. Only the mature spiritual herbs were picked. After dozens of years, or even hundreds of years, this place would still be restored to its original appearance before being picked. After keeping everything properly, Xianxia's gaze fell on the strange snake on the ground. This strange snake was a treasure from head to toe. Xianxia almost drooled. When the strange snake saw Xianxia's appearance, it couldn't help but reveal a look of fear. Chapter 643. It was unknown how many years the strange snake in the cold pond had lived in this cold pond. Just by looking at its skin that was not afraid of sword rays, one could tell that this strange snake was a rare creature from head to toe, from inside to outside. Tsk tisk. Xianxia swallowed her saliva and thought to herself, is this snake's meat also an aphrodisiac? The strange snake twisted its waist, looking somewhat pitiful. Seeing this, Xianxia smiled. This strange snake must be the guardian beast of the black-white fruit. She didn't know how many years this strange snake had been guarding it. Now that the treasure had fallen into her hands, it would definitely be a huge loss to the strange snake. Since she had already obtained the benefits, there was no need to pursue it and force it into a dead end. Moreover, this strange snake had been guarding the black-white fruit for many years. It was indirectly guarding it for her arrival. She didn't know how many people had given up on the idea of plucking the fruit and waited for her to arrive. This could be considered as loyal. Even if it didn't contribute anything, it still worked hard. Wouldn't it be too heartless for her to kill it the moment she obtained the black-white fruit? Xianxia thought about it for a long time. To put it bluntly, he had already taken the snake's things, so he could not take its life. As the saying goes, even thieves have their own morals. That was the logic behind it. Presumably, Xianxia made a hand seal and sent the dragon binding hoop to the air above the cold pond. With a flick of her index finger, the dragon binding hoop emitted a clear cry and enlarged by more than 2 times. The dispirited strange snake softly fell into the cold pond. Then the dragon binding hoop transformed into 2 small jade hoops and flew back into Xianxia's hands. Xianxia casually glanced at the strange snake that had already sunk into the cold pond and disappeared without a trace. She then turned around and walked back. After Xianxia had walked far away, the water in the cold pond moved slightly. The sarcoma on the strange snake's head slowly emerged, and then the entire snake's head appeared. The snake's red eyes stared at Xianxia's back for a long time before it submerged back into the water and dived into the depths of the cold pond. It dived very, very deep. Xianxia did not encounter any obstacles on his way back. He calmly arrived at the fork in the road and quietly stood at the intersection. Xianxia's gaze was fixed in another direction. No one knew what he was thinking. After waiting for a long time, his brows relaxed. He turned around and walked away without any reluctance. As for the place Xianxia didn't go, the mountain path was even more winding than the cold pond, and the inside was even more. However, this had nothing to do with Xianxia. What he was worried about now was how to find the way back. When Xianxia first came here, he rode on the wind and the direction was not too straight. Furthermore, he traveled a little further this time, so he himself was not sure where the campsite was. However, the Qihua forest was at the west of the Yulon Grand Canyon. Xianxia firmly remembered this point. As long as he went west, it would not be too far off. Looking at the sun that was a little to the west, Xianxia thought for a moment. His body rose into the air and flew towards the direction of the sun. If it wasn't for the fact that Xianxia secretly held onto the vitality stone and continuously absorbed the vital energy, relying on the vital energy in the vitality stone to support the imperial wind technique, then this guy was almost on par with the divine ability of the ancient cultivators. After flying for a while, Xianxia was somewhat intoxicated with this feeling. His feet did not touch the ground, and he rode on the wind. His clothes fluttered in the wind. Wasn't this the grace of a celestial? However, when he looked at his feet complacently, the pride in his heart immediately turned into ice water. This place seems to be very unfamiliar. Xianxia was somewhat unhappy. In these few days, he had walked around the campsite. Of course, he was familiar with the surrounding scenery. However, although the scenery under his feet was generally similar, Xianxia could clearly distinguish that this was a place that he had never been to before. Lost again. Xianxia curled his lips. Just as he was thinking, a small mountain appeared in front of him. There was actually a sound of water coming from the mountain. Could it be the waterfall that senior brother Liao mentioned? Xianxia thought to himself. Previously, Xianxia had searched all around the campsite, but he didn't see any waterfall. Who would have thought that after picking such a good spirit herb, he wouldn't think about the waterfall anymore? Instead, the waterfall had appeared and he had found it when he was lost. Is my luck really that good? Or is it bad? However, since he had found the waterfall, the bizarre birch forest would not be too far away. Of course, since he had found the waterfall, he could not let go of the ice soul grass beside the pool. A fly is also meat, had always been Xianxia's creed. Immediately, Xianxia flew towards the waterfall. When he pressed down on the cloud, wrong, pressed down on the wind, he floated down from the sky. He used his divine sense to observe the surroundings for a while. When he did not discover anything strange, he took out his jade water sword and slowly walked towards the pool. Previously, senior brother Liao had said that the guardian of the ice soul grass beside the pool was a white bear. If it was before today, Xianxia would not have taken it to heart. But just now, he had seen the power of the strange snake. In the end, he had to use the dragon binding ring to subdue the strange rock. Hence, he did not dare to underestimate the white bear that he had never seen before. Xianxia held the jade water sword and carefully walked to the side of the pool. The sound of the waterfall falling from the mountain was not soft and it covered all the surrounding sounds. However, Xianxia's divine sense did not discover any traces of the white bear. Furthermore, the water in the pool was turbulent and the water was so clear that he could see the bottom. Even without using his divine sense, he could see the entire pool clearly. Where was the shadow of the white bear? When Xianxia carefully looked around the pool, he was even more puzzled. Do you know why? The side of the pool was completely empty. There was not even a blade of grass. Where did the ice soul grass come from? Xianxia scratched his head and put the jade water sword back into his money pouch. Could it be that this was not the place that senior brother Liao had mentioned? When he walked closer to the pool and carefully looked around, he discovered that there were many traces of freshly dug soil. Only then did he realize that this place might not be the place he was looking for. But one thing was for sure. Someone had already beaten him to this place. Seeing this, Xianxia was even more puzzled. Among the disciples of the Pill Formation Hall who came to the strange birch forest this time, other than the 3 arhats who knew martial arts, the others all looked ordinary. Could it be that he had misjudged? There was actually a hidden great expert among these senior brothers who took advantage of their free time to come here and defeat the white bear and pluck the ice soul grass? Immediately, Zhang Xiaohua's admiration for this incense-spreading cult was once again like a lofty mountain. Really, any ordinary disciple could kill anyone. Haha. He had forgotten that he himself was a cultivator who hid under the disguise of an ordinary disciple. Since there was no more ice soul grass here, Zhang Xiaohua had no intention of staying. He pinched his fingers together and flew into the sky. This time he had confidence. Since someone had come here, the strange birch forest should not be far away. However, just as Zhang Xiaohua flew into the sky, before he could identify the direction, he saw that the short shrubs in front of him were in a mess. A huge white bear with pure white fur was lying there with its back facing the sky. And not far from it, a female disciple was lying face down on the grass. Oh! Zhang Xiaohua cried out in his heart. Why is there a female disciple here? Could it be a disciple of the Lingxiang Peak? But this female disciple's clothes are not the palace clothes of Chen Chen and Peacock. Right. Could it be the same as the female disciple I met last time? Why is this female disciple's neck gradually turning black? Zhang Xiaohua, who was floating in the air, did not dare to stay any longer. He scanned the surroundings with his divine sense and did not find any abnormalities. He quickly jumped down and came to the side of the female disciple. He called out in a low voice, "Senior sister? Wake up." After a few calls, the female disciple did not respond at all. Zhang Xiaohua went forward and turned the female disciple over. When he saw the female disciple's face, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but feel happy. What a coincidence! Wasn't this the female disciple he met that night when he was preparing to kill Lei Hu in the Yulon Prairie? Yes, the inner disciple of the Lingxiang Peak, Zhang Pinger. At this moment, Zhang Pinger's snow-white face was covered with a layer of dead ash. Needless to say, she must have been poisoned. Zhang Xiaohua stretched out his hand to feel Zhang Pinger's pulse and infused vital energy into it. After circulating it in his meridians, he had an idea. This Zhang Pinger was the same as senior brother Wang and should have been bitten by a poisonous snake. Zhang Pinger's body also had a medicinal effect that was fighting against the poison. However, it was obvious that Zhang Pinger was at a disadvantage. Zhang Pinger must have taken the antidote pill long ago, but the medicinal effect was limited and could not detoxify the poison. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua took out a handkerchief to conceal his identity. He first covered his face and then poured out another antidote pill from the jade bottle and placed it into Zhang Pinger's mouth, which had not yet stiffened. After that, he looked up and down to see where the wound was. However, Zhang Pinger's clothes were neat and tidy and there were no bloodstains or holes. Just as he was wondering, Zhang Pinger's mouth made a sound and her body moved slightly with a slight frown. It was precisely because of the antidote pill's effect that Zhang Pinger was about to wake up. At this moment, the most important thing to do was to find the location of the wound and force the poison out of her body. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua slapped her forehead and secretly said, "Zhang Pinger is a girl, so it's naturally inconvenient for me to use my divine sense. But other than divine sense, don't I still have vital energy? I only did a rough check just now and did not notice any abnormalities in the blood vessels." After Zhang Xiaohua infused vital energy into it again and carefully checked, a strange bitter smile appeared on his face. "You say, this poisonous snake is really something. Of all the places it could bite, it just had to bite that place. You say, even if I want to help her force the poison out, it's also inconvenient. Yes, even senior sister Zhang herself seems to be inconvenient." Chapter 644. The place where Zhang Pinger was bitten by the venomous snake was her buttocks. It was no wonder that Zhang Xiaohua didn't notice it. When he saw Zhang Pinger was lying on the ground and he was thinking of looking at the injury, so naturally he wouldn't look at that place carefully. And, even if he didn't look at the injury, a young man shouldn't stare at that place. By the time Zhang Xiaohua flipped Zhang Pinger over, he wouldn't be able to see it, and of course he wouldn't think that the venomous snake would bite there. So when Zhang Xiaohua found out that Zhang Pinger was injured at that place, he couldn't help but reveal a bitter smile. But even so, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. Since the incense cult's antidote pill was unable to cure the poison, then there would definitely be a certain degree of danger. Although the antidote pill which he had refined was effective, but if the remaining poison in the body wasn't cleared out in time, then perhaps all his previous efforts would be wasted. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua silently circulated his zhenqi and sent a wisp of zhenqi over to Zhang Pinger's meridians. Slowly and carefully, he forced the snake venom to the injured part of Zhang Pinger. Then, even more carefully, he forced the snake venom out. Luckily I have qi. Otherwise to save Zhang Pinger, wouldn't it be? Zhang Xiaohua secretly heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua raised his eyes and saw a pair of sparkling eyes staring at him. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and hurriedly released his hand. He had seen Zhang Pinger's indifference in front of the Pill Hall disciples and knew that this female disciple didn't really like male disciples. Zhang Pinger had already regained consciousness when Zhang Xiaohua had fed her the antidote pill and started to force the poison out of her body. But on one hand, Zhang Xiaohua was forcing the poison out of her body and she didn't dare to disturb Zhang Xiaohua, afraid that her inner energy would be disturbed and she would go into qi deviation. On the other hand, the filthy blood from her buttocks was slowly flowing out and had already dirted her clothes. She was so embarrassed that she didn't dare to move at all. At this time, seeing Zhang Xiaohua let go of her hand in panic, her heart relaxed, and a touch of red appeared on her snow-white face. Her heart was filled with curiosity. She still hadn't seen this man's face, but looking at his attire and figure, it was obvious that he was the person who had saved her on the Yulon Prairie that night. How could this person be so fated with her? That night, Zhang Xiaohua was in a hurry to escape, so she didn't have time to look carefully. At this time, when Zhang Xiaohua was concentrating on helping her expel the poison, she saw Zhang Xiaohua enough. Looking at his skin and face that was exposed outside of the handkerchief, it was very delicate, and there were no fine lines in the corners of his eyes. He must be a young disciple, younger than her. She didn't know how he had cultivated his martial arts. Looking at his clothes, Zhang Pinger was even more puzzled. Every hall of the School of Fragrance had its own clothes, and every disciple also had to wear their own hall's clothes. But this disciple seemed to be from the School of Pill Expansion, but there was no sign of a gourd or herbs on his sleeves. But if her previous guess was that he was an elite disciple, his clothes didn't seem right, and there was no need to cover his face with a handkerchief. When Zhang Xiaohua let go of her wrist, Zhang Pinger opened her mouth and said in a slightly hoarse voice, "This senior, may I ask, the Lei Hu from last time?" When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he didn't deny it and said with a smile, "That's me. It's such a coincidence to meet junior sister again. May I know why junior sister is here?" The School of Fragrance had always respected the female disciples. Zhang Pinger called Zhang Xiaohua's senior brother only to thank him for saving her life, and to show her respect. Now that she saw Zhang Xiaohua casually agree, she felt a little strange. But in front of her benefactor, what else could she do? Zhang Pinger smiled with difficulty and asked, "I am Lingxiang Peak's inner alchemy disciple, Zhang Pinger. May I ask senior brother's name?" Zhang Xiaohua thought to himself, "I know you are Zhang Pinger, but didn't you see my face covered? If it was convenient, I would have told you." So Zhang Xiaohua lowered his head and said, "So it's junior sister Zhang. Haha, my surname is Zhang. As for my name, we met by chance. Maybe the mountains will not change, and the water will always flow. I won't say it, okay?" When Zhang Pinger heard this, she giggled. However, she frowned and said somewhat awkwardly, "Since senior brother Zhang is unwilling to say, I won't ask any more. In any case, senior brother Zhang has saved me twice. I will remember it in my heart." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and didn't say anything. But after waiting for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua was still lying on the ground and didn't get up. This made Zhang Xiaohua feel a little embarrassed. Think about it, a girl is lying there for no reason, and you are standing by her side. This scene, cough cough, how ambiguous. Zhang Xiaohua looked around and said, "That, junior sister Zhang, I have already forced the snake venom out of your body. Although your body is a little exhausted, it seems like you are just a little weak. You should be able to get up." Hearing this, Zhang Pinger's snow-white face blushed. She thought for a moment and said, "Senior brother Zhang, junior sister is a little thirsty. I think it is because of the snake venom. Not far from here, there is a pool. Can you help me get some water?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and looked at the water bag that Zhang Pinger threw to the side. Although the water bag was a little empty, there was still water. However, when he saw Zhang Pinger's shy expression and her slightly moving body, he suddenly understood something. "Ha ha ha. Zhang Xiaohua laughed inwardly. He was no longer the ignorant youth from a few years ago who blindly asked questions whenever he saw something he didn't understand. He stood up and walked to the side, picked up the half-filled water bag and was about to leave. Zhang Ping'er called out, "Senior brother Zhang, you didn't bring the water bag?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and shook his head. "No? Why? That, can you leave the water bag behind?" Zhang Ping'er asked shyly. "This." Zhang Xiaohua was completely speechless. "If you don't let me take the water bag, how am I going to get the water?" At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly had a flash of inspiration and thought to himself, "Ioyo, look at me. How can I be so careless? Girls love cleanliness the most. Is there a need to think about the use of this water?" "Ha ha ha ha." Zhang Xiaohua laughed foolishly, put down the water bag, and walked away. When Zhang Xiaohua came back with a small morning glory, Zhang Ping'er had already changed her clothes. When she saw Zhang Xiaohua using the morning glory to get the water, she couldn't help but laugh. Zhang Ping'er was very beautiful, but she was usually as cold as ice and kept people away. This flower-like smile was very rare, and Zhang Xiaohua was slightly distracted. Zhang Ping'er saw that Zhang Xiaohua was distracted and felt a little shy. She walked forward and took the morning glory from Zhang Xiaohua. She drank the spring water in the flower and said with a smile, "Senior brother Zhang, thank you for the spring water. It's the first time I've drunk this water." After that, she didn't return the morning glory to Zhang Xiaohua and just held it in her hand. Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head and said with a smile, "Junior sister Zhang, you're joking." Then he asked, "Junior sister Zhang, why did you come here? How did you get bitten by a snake?" Zhang Ping'er thought for a moment and said, "I won't hide it from senior brother Zhang. I'm an inner sect alchemist disciple of the Lingxiang Peak. My master specializes in alchemy for inner sect disciples. Last year, when he was practicing martial arts, he suffered from qi deviation and his internal force went astray. Although an inner sect disciple saved his life, to restore his internal force, he still needs to take the energy recovery pill. The sect's energy recovery pill was used up 10 years ago, so we have to refine it again. Refining the energy recovery pill requires a rare energy recovery grass. This spiritual grass can only be found in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Our Yulon cult's pill expansion hall doesn't grow it. Therefore, during the Yulon evening refinement, I boldly asked to come here to try my luck, but..." Zhang Ping'er sighed and continued, "It's just that the energy recovery grass has always been rare. Even in the strange birch forest of the pill expansion hall, I haven't seen it. I can only rely on my experience as an inner sect disciple to try my luck. Presumably, senior brother Zhang already knows that when I was in the Yulon Prairie, I encountered the thunder tiger before I even reached the pool. If it wasn't for senior brother Zhang's arrival, I would have lost my life before I could even start searching. For the past few days, I have been searching for it, but I have been empty-handed. Today, I finally found a pool, but other than the ice soul grass, the rest of the herbs are just ordinary herbs." Then she pointed to the white bear's corpse and said, "Just as I was about to leave after picking the herbs, I happened to encounter the white bear. I fought and retreated until I came here. After using all my strength to kill the white bear, I was bitten by a red stork snake. That snake is also intelligent, so I reckon it was always by the side, waiting for me to relax before it attacked. By the time I turned around, it had already slipped away. I didn't expect the detoxification pill refined by Master to be useless." "That's right, senior brother Zhang. Where did you get your detoxification pill? Could it be that the fragrant religion has..." At this point, Zhang Ping'er looked at Zhang Xiaohua with some curiosity. Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head again and said with an embarrassed smile, "I picked it up on the mountain path, hee." Zhang Ping'er chuckled and said, "However, fortunately, I met senior brother Zhang again. Moreover, senior brother also had such a miraculous pill, so I was able to keep my life." "Oh, senior brother Zhang, did you pick up a lot of these pills? Can you share one with me?" Zhang Xiaohua stared blankly for a moment before replying, "It's all right. I picked up 3 of them. I'll keep one for myself, and I'll give the last one to you." After saying that, he leaned to the side and took out a jade bottle from his bosom. He poured out a pill and handed it over. Zhang Ping'er received it, sniffed it with her nose, and said in surprise, "Senior apprentice brother Zhang, Why doesn't this medicinal pill have any fragrance? Are you sure you didn't get it wrong? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, No, it's this one. You'll know if you smell it carefully. Zhang Ping'er placed the medicinal pill under her nose and sniffed it carefully. Only then did she nod and put the medicinal pill back into the jade bottle. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua had an idea and said, Junior sister Zhang, I also have a presumptuous request. I wonder if you can agree? Chapter 645. Zhang Ping'er was taken aback at first, then she smiled and said, Senior brother Zhang, you must be joking. You're my savior. If there's anything you need, please speak your mind. I definitely won't agree. As soon as she finished speaking, her face flushed red. Even Zhang Xiaohua blushed. It was as if the words eat grass and tie rings, repay with one's body appeared in their minds. Zhang Xiaohua quickly said, Actually, it's nothing. Junior sister just said that she picked ice soulgrass beside the pond. I happen to need it. Can you? I see. Zhang Ping'er smiled and said, I thought it was something serious. You made it sound so serious. After she finished speaking, she took out a few jade boxes from the bag beside her and handed them over. She said, Senior brother Zhang, this is the spiritual grass that I casually picked on my way here. Although it's not as good as the origin returning grass, it's still quite precious. The ice soul grass inside is even several hundred years old. Senior brother, take it all. Zhang Xiaohua quickly declined and said, There's no need for so many. I only need the ice soul grass. However, Zhang Ping'er would not let him go. She stuffed all the jade boxes into his hands. Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to take them all. However, his hands were empty. He did not even have a bag. Zhang Ping'er thought about it for a long time. Finally, she gritted her teeth and took out an old piece of clothing. She wrapped the jade boxes and handed them to Zhang Xiaohua. This. Zhang Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at the colorful bag. He was touched. After Zhang Xiaohua put away the bag, Zhang Ping'er looked at the white bear not far away and smiled. Senior brother Zhang, that white bear was killed by me. However, I don't need it. If you need it, you can cut off the tail of the bear. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He immediately understood and smiled. Thank you. Junior sister Zhang. I didn't expect that a pill I picked up could be exchanged for so many things. Senior brother Zhang, you don't have to be so courteous. If senior brother Zhang were to act, things would be much simpler. You wouldn't be in such a sorry state like little sister. After saying that, Zhang Ping'er hesitated and said, Senior brother Zhang, our surnames are both Zhang. Perhaps we were from the same family 500 years ago. Senior brother Zhang, junior sister Zhang, it sounds very awkward. Why don't we just call them senior brother and junior sister? The term senior brother and junior sister was usually used between disciples who weren't familiar with each other. It was because they didn't know each other's surnames that they addressed each other in such a manner. It should have been estranged. However, when Zhang Ping'er said it, it had a different meaning. No matter how one looked at it, it sounded more intimate than directly calling senior brother by his surname. Zhang Xiaohua didn't mind. She nodded and said, I'll follow junior sister's instructions. Hearing this, Zhang Ping'er was very happy and said, Senior martial brother, wait a moment. I will help you cut off the tail. Looking at Zhang Ping'er's expression, where was her usual cold and frosty self? Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly stopped her. It's better not, junior sister. Senior brother only has a few antidote pills here. Your body is still weak. If I tire you out, I don't have any other pills for you. Zhang Ping'er giggled when she heard this. She was really gorgeously dressed. After Zhang Xiaohua cut off the tail, Zhang Ping'er said, Senior martial brother is looking down on me. Just now, when senior martial brother went to fetch water, I already took a blood replenishing pill. I've already recovered. There's no need for senior martial brother to worry about me. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and pretended to be surprised. Junior sister also picked up a pill? How lucky! When Zhang Ping'er heard this, she didn't understand what it meant. When she understood in an instant, she had already bent over from laughing. When she bent over, her buttocks were still a little uncomfortable. When Zhang Ping'er had laughed enough, The two of them slowly walked forward aimlessly. After walking for half a meal's time, Zhang Pinger asked, "Senior Marshal Brother, are you going back to the Training Stone Forest next?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and thought, "The Training Stone Forest? What is this place?" However, he vaguely said, "And that's right." Then he asked, "Then what are junior sister's plans?" Zhang Pinger was a little sad. Looking at the sun in the west, she said, "Master's injuries are all due to this origin returning grass. If we can't get it this time, the next time will be 5 years later. Even if we get it, Master won't be able to use it." Zhang Xiaohua nodded. This origin returning grass was the name of an immortal spirit herb. Zhang Xiaohua also knew that it was a golden herb that looked like a ball. He had already collected many spirit herbs, but he still hadn't seen the origin returning grass. It could be seen how rare this herb was. Then he asked, "Then where is junior sister going to look for it?" Zhang Pinger shook her head. "I also don't know. I've already gone to the places that senior marshal sister mentioned earlier. There's not a single trace of it. The rest will depend on my luck." "That's fine. I'll just walk around and find it." Zhang Xiaohua also laughed bitterly. If Zhang Pinger had an exact place, he might be able to help a little by following her. But it was useless for him to walk around randomly. Thus he said, "That's the only way. Junior sister, since I can't help you, then let's part ways here." Zhang Pinger heard and bowed. "Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother, for saving my life." When we returned to Lingering Fragrance Peak. But when she saw Zhang Xiaohua using a handkerchief to cover his face, she couldn't say the rest of her words. Zhang Xiaohua waved his hand and said, "Junior sister, don't worry. You've already given me so much. We don't owe each other anything. All right, I'm leaving. Junior sister, take care. If you're not successful in collecting the herbs, you should return early." After speaking, he cupped his hands and was about to use his qinggong to leave. But the moment he moved, he suddenly stopped. He turned his head and asked, "Junior sister, do you know where the Training Stone Forest is?" Zhang Pinger saw Zhang Xiaohua stop and thought that he was going to say something important. Hearing him ask such a question, she almost fell. She steadied her body and pointed in a direction, saying, "It's about half a day's journey to the southeast." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Thank you, junior sister. Oh right, I'll ask again. Where is the Qihua Forest?" Zhang Pinger's body steadied again and again. She forcefully suppressed the indescribable emotions in her heart and pointed in a direction, saying, "It's also about half a day's journey to the southwest. So it's in that direction. No wonder I couldn't reach it after flying for so long. It's because I went astray." Zhang Xiaohua thought to himself. Then, his body floated up and directly flew towards the southeast. His voice sounded out, "Thank you, junior sister. If fate allows it, we'll meet again." Zhang Xiaohua left as soon as he said he would. His elegant figure leaped a few times and disappeared in front of her eyes. Zhang Pinger stared into the distance, somewhat dazed. Then, her heart was filled with shock. Just which outer sect hallmaster was this disciple of? His inner strength was extremely dense and his qinggong was extremely high. It was almost comparable to an ordinary inner sect disciple. That's right. The red stork snake's poison was not something that the five-colored snake could compare to. How could it be forced out by ordinary inner strength? Zhang Xiaohua did not know about this matter. At this moment, he had only used the ethereal steps to travel towards the southeast for the time it took to brew a cup of tea before stopping. He took off his handkerchief and kept the colorful package into his money pouch. After carefully identifying the direction, he rose into the air and headed straight for the strange birch forest. Zhang Xiaohua had indeed walked far today. After the time it took to eat a meal, he finally saw the familiar scenery. Zhang Xiaohua was about to land when he suddenly heard a soft roar from the other side of the strange birch forest. Zhang Xiaohua was startled. "Io, could it be that some ferocious beast is coming? Wasn't the strange birch forest said to be safe? If I wait for the ferocious beast to come before making a move, wouldn't I be in a passive position? Only by eliminating it before it gets close to the strange birch forest can I ensure the safety of the pill expansion hall. I should still go and take a look. It's not too late." Zhang Xiaohua looked at the setting sun and thought to himself. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua changed his direction and flew towards the direction of the ferocious beast's roar. Xianxia flew with the wind. It was not a true flying technique. He was not too high off the ground and could not see too far. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, he finally got close to the ferocious beast. He could only hear the beast's roar getting louder and louder, but he could not see the beast's shadow. Suddenly, the beast's roar was somewhat miserable. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and thought, could it be that he met an outer disciple again? He immediately descended from the sky and moved forward using the earth escape technique. When Zhang Xiaohua quietly poked his head out from the ground, he saw a woman wearing a red palace dress on a flat piece of land. She held a long sword and was fighting with a lion with fiery red fur. Fire lion? Zhang Xiaohua secretly shouted. He had heard from Lu Chaoxian that the fire lion lived in an extremely hot place. Its fur was the color of flames. The fire lion's name was Beast. It had the most violent temperament. As long as it saw something that was not pleasing to its eyes, it would tear it apart and bite it. It was the most powerful beast in the Orchid Dusk refinement. Even if it was an outer disciple, it would take dozens of people to guarantee that it would not be defeated. At this time, the fire lion's fiery red fur was already bleeding a lot. Its 4 limbs were slightly trembling on the ground. It must have suffered a great loss in the hands of this inner disciple. However, the fire lion was still roaring. Its eyes were fixed on the woman in the palace dress, ready to attack. The woman in the palace dress opposite him seemed to be leisurely. Her long sword was slanted, faintly covering the vital part of the fire lion. The eyes hidden behind the veil flashed a trace of satisfaction. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua secretly shook his head. What's going on? In just a short while, we've encountered 2 hunts. The previous round was won by the beasts, but this round, the humans are going to win. Zhang Xiaohua thought this way, but she was terribly wrong. Due to the limited area he could move in, it was very remote. In this half a day, he had only seen 2 fights. In fact, during the Yulon Dusk refinement, in the Yulon Prairie, the Training Stone Forest, and many other famous places, this kind of hunting was everywhere. The entire Yulon Grand Canyon seemed to be ravaged by the disciples of the fragrant religion. At this moment, the fire lion seemed to have seen a flaw in the female disciple's movement. It roared and pounced forward. The female disciple was not in a hurry. She slowly stepped aside and calmly displayed her sword skills. From time to time, she would stab the fire lion with her sword. Then, she would move away so that the fire lion would not be able to catch up with her. When there was an opening, she would stab the fire lion with her sword. In just a short while, Zhang Xiaohua had already stabbed the fire lion's vital points 7 times. Chapter 646. What an exquisite swordsmanship! Zhang Xiaohua exclaimed in admiration. Although he didn't know much about swordsmanship, he was still within 10 feet of the female disciple. With his divine sense, he could clearly see the trajectory of the female disciple's swordsmanship. Zhang Xiaohua felt that the female disciple's swordsmanship complemented the female disciple's internal energy. At the same time, it complemented the female disciple's agility and flexibility. It was truly a peerless swordsmanship. The fire lion seemed to know that it was in a bad situation. With a sorrowful roar, it rushed forward. At this time, the female disciple didn't dodge. She tapped her feet lightly and shot forward like a rabbit. She flew under the fire lion's abdomen. Zhang Xiaohua saw it clearly. When the female disciple flew past, she raised the long sword in her hand. The sharp edge of the sword made a huge cut on the fire lion's abdomen. When the fire lion fell to the ground, its limbs went soft and it couldn't roar anymore. It only gasped for breath and lay down. Not long after, the grass below it was dyed red with blood. The fire lion's head tilted to the side and it didn't move anymore. The female disciple seemed to be very confident in her sword. She didn't even look at the fire lion's corpse and directly used her qing gong to fly towards the mountain. Looking at her flying technique, it was even better than the Misty School's ethereal steps. Zhang Xiaohua scratched his chin and made up his mind. He burrowed into the ground and quietly followed the female disciple to the top of the mountain. Not long after, the 2 of them reached the top of the mountain. When Zhang Xiaohua's head popped out from the ground, he was shocked. This wasn't an ordinary mountain. There was actually a huge pit on the mountain, and in the pit, fiery red magma was boiling. Moreover, There seemed to be some kind of restriction above the magma that prevented the heat and firepower of the magma from wantonly leaking out. What made Zhang Xiaohua even more surprised was that there was actually a huge golden lotus in the magma. Tinder golden lotus. Zhang Xiaohua almost screamed when she saw it. This was a heavenly treasure that was vaguely mentioned in the Compendium of Herbs. Even the Compendium of Herbs did not explain the growth and use of this golden fire lotus. It only drew a simple picture and the place where it grew, indicating that this kind of thing could not be easily grown. For a moment, Zhang Xiaohua had the urge to kill and steal the treasure. However, as soon as this thought arose, he immediately killed it in his heart. As the ancient said, a gentleman loves money, and he obtains it in a proper way. Although he could take the heavenly treasure for himself, if he killed the protector beast like the disciple of the cult of fragrance, he would also kill the disciple of the cult of fragrance and take the heavenly treasure for himself. How could he walk the Jianghu with compassion and a chivalrous heart? How could he experience the world of mortals and understand the heavenly Tao? At the moment when Zhang Xiaohua was enlightened, Zhang Xiaohua's mind seemed to have left his body again. However, this time, his mind did not rise, but stayed above Zhang Xiaohua's head. The brilliance of the heavenly Tao enveloped his mind, silently transmitting something to him. It seemed that his mind had already received the approval of the heavenly Tao. The brilliance shrouded him for a very short time and disappeared very quickly. Zhang Xiaohua's mind seemed to have received something, but also seemed to have not received anything. Only when his mind saw the starry sky of the heavenly Tao did he feel a different familiarity and closeness. Then, his mind returned to the bodies. When Zhang Xiaohua regained his senses, he felt that nothing had changed around him. It was as if nothing had happened. Not far away, the masked disciple was the same as before. He stood there in a daze, as if he had never seen this thing before. After a moment, the disciple seemed to have made up his mind. He waved his left hand and threw something towards the tinder golden lotus in the magma. Zhang Xiaohua's mind had already enveloped the entire mountain top. He could clearly see that it was an almost transparent and silent clue. She saw that the clue, which was as thick as a baby's pinky, accurately wrapped around the petals of the tinder golden lotus. The thin clue did not change under the scorching temperature of the magma. Needless to say, this was a unique treasure of the incense religion. Seeing that the clue worked, the female disciple pulled with her left hand. But it did not move. She waved her right hand again and a small hidden weapon shot towards the bottom of the tinder golden lotus. It was connected to the thin stalk of the tinder golden lotus. Pa! A light sound was heard. The thin stalk broke upon contact. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. When the female disciple saw that the stem was broken, she raised her left hand and the golden lotus slowly flew over as if it had a mind of its own. The female disciple's movements were also very nimble. She immediately took out a large jade box from the bag on the ground and opened the lid with one hand. She waved her left hand and the golden lotus obediently flew into the jade box. The female disciple's face was tense the entire time. While she was putting away the golden lotus, she was also paying attention to her surroundings. When she put the golden lotus into the jade box and closed the lid, an uncontrollable joy appeared on her face. She then kept the jade box and picked up the bag. Using her qing gong, she headed down the mountain. It was as if she did not want to stay any longer. When the female disciple went down the mountain and was far away, Zhang Xiaohua popped his head out from the ground. He rubbed his nose and looked at the female disciple's back. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. He muttered to himself, "Sigh, it's so sad to be so uncultured." After speaking, he walked in front of the magma and formed a hand seal. The fire and earth escape technique was activated. The human figure immediately disappeared from the ground and went straight into the magma. When he reached the magma, he saw that the thin stalk that the female disciple had broken was swaying in the magma. Below the thin stalk, there was a fist-sized seed. On the other side of the seed, there was another thin stalk that was only 3 inches long. On this stalk, there were 2 small protrusions that looked exactly like the Bingdi lotus. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. He took out an exquisite jade box and carefully inscribed a few seals into it. After thinking for a while, he used his right hand to inscribe a few complicated seals on the tinder golden lotus. Then, he reached out with his right hand and grabbed the tinder golden lotus seed as well as the surrounding magma into the jade box. He held the jade box in his left hand and kept the seed and the magma. The magma wrapped around the seed was floating in the middle of the jade box, and it was rotating subtly. Xianxia closed the jade box and formed a series of restrictions around the jade box. When the jade box emitted a white light, it covered all sides of the jade box. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief and keep the jade box into his money bag. The Tinder Golden Lotus, as the name suggested, was a golden lotus that grew in fire. The golden lotus and the 7-colored lotus seed were mysterious. Although the 100-herb compendium did not mention the use of this ancient treasure, it was clear that the most precious part of the Tinder Golden Lotus was its seed. It was a seed that could grow in fire. This seed had a special feature. It was heavy in fire, but it could float in the fire. As long as there was enough fire, it could grow into a golden lotus. On the other side of the Tinder Golden Lotus that Xianxia obtained was the Tinder Golden Lotus. This Tinder Golden Lotus could only survive in fire. If it was forcefully taken out of the fire, it would turn into ashes the moment it left the fire. Presumably, the records of the Tinder Golden Lotus had been lost long ago. The female disciple did not know about it and only took the beautiful lotus and the lotus seed. She did not pay attention to the Tinder Golden Lotus in the magma. This was why Xianxia was able to get such a good deal. Fortunately, I did not kill anyone to steal the treasure. This young master's character is really indescribable. Xianxia was secretly proud of his character. He thought to himself, is this the ancient saying, buy the casket and return the pearl? The incense cult did not teach this Tinder Golden Lotus to their disciples. Instead they gave it to me. Ha ha ha. He almost fell into the magma laughing. In fact, this guy had forgotten that the female disciple of the cult of fragrance might not have the strength to pull the golden fire lotus out of the magma. Even if she did, wouldn't the golden fire lotus turn into nothingness? Perhaps, the incense cult's record of the Tinder Golden Lotus was about taking the Tinder Golden Lotus. After taking the Tinder Golden Lotus, Xianxia was still not satisfied. He moved back and forth in the magma, wanting to find more luminous pearl. After all, he did not bring many. Unfortunately, after searching for a long time, he did not find even one. He could not help but feel sad. However, he did not understand the reason. Maybe I have used up all my luck. Let's save a few people first. Xianxia thought. This was not Xianxia's fault. The 100-herb compendium had forgotten to record that the luminous pearl was formed from the essence of the magma. The Tinder Golden Lotus grew by absorbing the essence of the fire. If the Tinder Golden Lotus grew in the magma on this mountain, there probably would not be any more essence left. Perhaps in a few decades, or even 100 years, when Xianxia participated in the Orchid Evening Refinement, the magma would have a luminous pearl. Seeing that the search for the luminous pearl was fruitless, and that there was nothing good in the magma, Xianxia directly flew out. He looked around the still quiet mountain and was about to fly away. Suddenly, he thought of something. He walked to the side of the fire lion and cut off its tail. If he did not cut it off, it would be a waste. He might as well use it as a souvenir. When Xianxia flew back to the Qihua forest, it was already dark. Landing from the sky, Xianxia slowly walked back to the camp. Before he reached the tent, he heard a long sigh from inside. It was Lu Chaoxian's aged voice. Sighed junior brother Ren died young. What a pity. I thought he could be the second Lu Lihong. When these words entered her ears, Xianxia almost fell to the ground. Big brother, although I didn't accompany you to gather herbs, you don't have to curse me like this, right? Chapter 647. Xianxia was about to speak when another voice came from the tent. It was senior brother Wang. Junior brother Ran is a kind-hearted person. He should live a long life. There won't be any accidents. Another voice said, senior brother Wang is wrong. Good people don't live long. You shouldn't split the herbs in half. Ren Xiaoyao can't accept your kindness. You. Senior brother Wang was furious and wanted to refute. Another person said, Shidi's words are rough, but they are extremely right. Wang Xixiang, let's give our share to Lu Xixiang. Although Ren Xiaoyao promised very well before and vowed to protect us, when we arrived at the strange birch forest, he ran away first. He didn't even pick a single medicinal herb. How could he play a role as the leader? Now we have to give some of our herbs to him and let him take them back to the pill expansion hall. Isn't this a bit unfair? Junior brother Fan, you're wrong. You said before that you would give him a share of the herbs. How can you go back on your word? Senior brother Wang said angrily. Junior brother Fan ignored him and retorted, if he protected us, I would naturally keep my promise. But he didn't even stay by our side. He just left a sentence and said not to leave the tent at night. Is this the so-called protection? If that's the case, how can I just give away the herbs that I worked so hard to pick to him? Look at the other disciples. 3 ahats are guarding them. Even flies can't get close. That's called protection. Then he added, even if you want to say this, you have to wait until Ren Xiaoyao comes back alive. Lu Chaoxian dissuaded him. It's still a long time before the end of the trial. Maybe junior brother Ren went too far and didn't have time to return to the strange birch forest. Actually, junior brother Fan also knows that junior brother Ren had no choice but to go. If it wasn't for the ice spirit grass, he would have stayed with us. Maybe junior brother Ren will come back tomorrow. Tomorrow? Junior brother Fan mocked. Tomorrow will come? When tomorrow comes, tomorrow will become today. Lu Chaoxian was speechless. I've already told the other senior brothers that I'll be with them tonight. I've already packed my things. Senior brother Lu, please don't blame me. You've also said that you're our leader in name. Since you don't want these herbs, I didn't take out your share. Lu Chaoxian smiled bitterly and shook his head, not saying anything. Senior martial brother Wang was even more furious. He said, junior brother Ren's life is still uncertain. Before he could finish his sentence, a lazy voice sounded from outside the tent. Who is it? Who is cursing me? When Lu Chaoxian, senior brother Wang, and the others heard this, they were stunned. Then, their faces lit up and they ran out. Wasn't the person standing outside the tent Zhang Xiaohua? Senior martial brother Wang walked over and pulled Zhang Xiaohua to the left and to the right. He said, junior brother Ren, why did you only learn it now? I haven't seen you for a few days. You seem normal. Zhang Xiaohua raised her hand and turned it left and right. She said, of course I'm good. I'm not missing any arms or legs. It's very stable. Ha ha ha, good. Lu Chaoxian also laughed. It's good that you're back safely. But, how's your ice soul grass? It's almost there. There shouldn't be any problems. I've already found its tracks. But the beast guarding it is very powerful. I have to think of a way. Zhang Xiaohua began to talk nonsense again. Senior martial brother Wang said, that's good. But, safety first. The punishment in the hall isn't very severe. Don't lose your life because of this. The punishment isn't severe? Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly to herself. Thinking of the dungeon on Baiyue Peak of the Pill Tower Hall, and then thinking of Vice Hall leader Su's inexplicable ruthlessness, Zhang Xiaohua could only take these words as consolation. The other disciples were also happy. They went up and said a few words, then clustered around Zhang Xiaohua and walked into the tent. They all sat down. Senior martial brother Wang looked around and suddenly said, where's junior martial brother Fan? He was complaining here just now. How come he's gone now? Zhang Xiaohua smiled. When you came out just now, a senior martial brother went out with a bunch of things. Is it that Fan? It's him. Senior martial brother Wang insisted and told her what happened. Zhang Xiaohua cupped her hands and said to the other disciples, senior martial brothers, I'm ashamed to say that I promised to protect you all. But I still haven't gotten the ice soul grass. I just came back to tell you that I'm safe. In a while, when it gets dark, I still have to go out. In this birch forest, I really can't protect you all. You don't have to give me the herbs you promised earlier. Also, if you're like senior martial brother Fan, you can go find someone else to rely on. I won't stop you. Lu Chaoxian and senior martial brother Wang were needless to say. Zhang Xiaohua didn't even look at them. The other 6 disciples looked at each other. One of them also cupped his hands and said, junior martial brother Ren, we've already seen your martial arts during the battle. You're willing to trade your pills for our herbs. It's enough to show your benevolence. Also, didn't you say that as long as we follow you, you'll protect us? Even when you said not to leave the tent at night, we've firmly remembered that. Now, how can we not follow you? Lu Chaoxian and Senior Martial Brother Wang also said, Junior Martial Brother Ren, these Junior Martial Brothers don't have any complaints. We can guarantee that. You don't have to say such things. Zhang Xiaohua clapped her hands and smiled. That's good. Since you all trust me, I'll definitely protect you all. That's right, I don't want the herbs that you all worked so hard to pick. Senior Martial Brother Wang was anxious and wanted to interrupt again. Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand. Senior Martial Brother Wang, don't say anything. Let me finish. I found some very rare herbs on the other side of the river. They're very old and are more than enough to complete the task. Your herbs are no longer worthy of my attention. Lu Chaoxian was overjoyed when he heard this. Congratulations, Junior Martial Brother Ren. Your luck is really good. You're really the second Lu Lihong. Since that's the case, we brothers won't be polite. We'll keep the herbs for ourselves. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua secretly rolled her eyes. Of all people to compare with, why did you have to compare yourself with that bastard? Isn't my character 1,000 times better than his? At this time, Lu Chaoxian moved closer and asked mysteriously, Junior Martial Brother Ren, what are the herbs? Can you tell us? Or, can we go with you? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. Seeing everyone's expectant expression, she couldn't help but smile bitterly. This, Senior Martial Brothers, although the herbs are good, it's better to be alive. Didn't someone say that just now? The other side of the river is really dangerous. I've seen white bears, fire lions and the like. If it weren't for my good Qinggong, I wouldn't have seen you all. Hearing the fierce names of these fierce beasts, everyone's expression changed. They had already given up on the idea. Zhang Xiaohua said, if Junior Martial Brother can find something cheap, I'll give it to you all. What do you think? Everyone was overjoyed when they heard this. They were all very grateful. Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said in her heart, it seems that I'll have to go out and look tomorrow. Any old ones will do. I don't care about these, but these Senior Martial Brothers really need them. Then she said, Junior Martial Brother will rest first. When it's late, I'll go out and try my luck. Everyone, I'll say the same thing. Don't go out at night. The wild beasts are fierce. All the disciples laughed and walked away. Zhang Xiaohua sat cross-legged and closed her eyes to comprehend the heavenly Tao that she had just communicated with. At this time, the heavenly Tao, in Zhang Xiaohua's heart, was a little more intimate. When it was close to midnight, Zhang Xiaohua once again set up restrictions around the tent. Then, she escaped to the cave that she usually used and closed her eyes to cultivate the Carefree Heart Sutra. Tonight was a moonless night. Thick clouds covered the entire sky, and the wind was very strong, causing the grass and leaves to rustle. During the day, the beasts were all asleep, and some of them were still drinking from the various pools. At night, the beasts were also active, hunting for food and making a living. The entire Yulon Grand Canyon was the same as the night for countless years. It was peaceful, but also not peaceful. However, this night was destined to be a special night. It was a night that no one would ever forget. Inside the cave, Zhang Xiaohua was wrapped in an almost colorless cocoon of light. Her speed of absorbing starlight and vitality had increased to a new level. Suddenly, from the far east, there was a roar. Although this roar was not very loud, it was actually able to spread throughout the entire Yulon Grand Canyon. All the fierce beasts in the Yulon Grand Canyon were awakened. No matter if they were sleeping or hunting, they all immediately stood up. All the disciples of the aroma cult who were in the trial also woke up from their sleep or meditation. Strangely, they tilted their ears to listen, not knowing what this sound was. Immediately, the roar came one after another. It was like waves hitting the shore, attacking the ears of everyone and the beasts. All the fierce beasts began to become irritable and restless. Everyone also stood up in panic. This situation seemed to have never happened in the records of the aroma cult over the years. Suddenly, the roar began to become hoarse. Some were pleading, some were sorrowful. In the end, it actually connected together and gradually became powerless. All the ferocious beasts had already started running towards the extreme east, as if something was summoning them there. Just as all the ferocious beasts were sprinting, the roar from the far east rang out again. This time it was different from before. It actually split the sky and was extremely ear-piercing. The entire roar was solemn and stirring. However, just as the roar reached the 9 heavens, it immediately stopped. Immediately after, from the extreme north, a sharp screech that sounded like metal and stone rang out. That roar was actually moving extremely quickly, heading east. All of the running beasts immediately stopped when they heard the last sound. Their eyes turned red as they roared and rushed towards the entire Yulon Grand Canyon like a tide. The entire Yulon Grand Canyon was in an uproar. Be it humans or beasts, only Xianxia, who was sitting cross-legged in the middle of the starlight, remained calm. Chapter 648. The entire Yulon Grand Canyon was boiling with beast blood. At the bottom of a steep cliff, hundreds of Shuyu Hall disciples were standing outside the tents in a panic. Some of them were holding swords and some were holding digging tools. They looked at the dark night sky with fear, not knowing what was going on here. At this moment, they suddenly heard a mountain-like tremor. It was as if someone was using a huge hammer to hit the ground. The tremor was getting closer and closer, so close that it made people feel uneasy. A few disciples who were skilled in martial arts held long swords in their hands and used their qinggong to look forward. Before they could walk a few feet, they heard a ga sound. In the dark night sky, there seemed to be a few thicker dark clouds floating over. These dark clouds quickly approached. The disciple who was standing on the tree saw it clearly and couldn't help but cry out, "Diamond Crow? Why are they here?" After saying that, he was about to jump down from the tree. But at this moment, 3 strange crows flew out from the dark clouds like lightning. Their wings were a size bigger than ordinary crows, and their beaks were also a size bigger. Without waiting for the disciple to move, they cried out, "Ga," and pounced on his face. The disciple saw that he didn't have time to jump down, so he quickly raised his sword to meet the crows. Who knew that the crows didn't dodge at all and were stabbed by the sword. However, at the moment of the stab, sparks seemed to fly out. The crows were only hit diagonally, but they turned in the air and flew back. The disciple's sword was shaken askew. Before he could retrieve it, the other 2 golden crows had already flown in front of him. They nimbly opened their beaks and pecked out the disciple's 2 eyes. The disciple screamed and dropped his sword. He covered his eyes with both hands and his whole body was unsteady. Then the golden crows behind rushed up and pecked at the disciple's body. The disciple screamed in pain and fell down from the tree. The crows didn't let him go and chased him down. After a while, the disciple's screams stopped. He was pecked to death. The other disciples had the opportunity to jump down from the tree, but before they could stand firm, the mountain-like vibration had already arrived in front of them. They looked up and saw that there were all kinds of beasts mixed together and rushing over. The disciples wanted to raise their legs, but the swift cheetahs in front of them didn't give them any chance. They bit their chests. When the disciples were about to draw their swords, the red-eyed Pai-yong next to them pushed its horn against the swords. A few clang sounds were drowned out by the running beasts. They didn't even have the chance to fight back before their throats were bitten by the cheetahs. The disciples with martial arts were like this, not to mention the other ordinary disciples. The ferocious beasts of the night had long subverted their understanding. The docile piang and elk, the cute squirrels and obedient rabbits, all pounced on them with envy, using their teeth, claws, and horns as if they were their irreconcilable natural enemies. Their natural enemies, such as the thunder tiger, the white bear, and the fire lion, all pounced on them together, tearing them apart, biting them to pieces, and eating them into their stomachs. In a grotesque stone forest, the outer disciples of Wuming Hall held their weapons and jumped to the top of the stone pillars. In the periphery of the stone forest, the same disciples were standing on top of each other. They looked at the dark grassland. Although they were scared, they didn't panic. Suddenly, a series of shwa-shwa sounds came from all directions, and clusters of black shadows slowly appeared not far away. However, the shwa-shwa sounds clearly came from the front of these black shadows. At this time, a disciple screamed, "Ouch, snake!" Then, there was no sound. The disciples next to him woke up and hurriedly looked at the ground. They couldn't help but be shocked and lose their previous calmness. Red stork snake. 5-colored snake. Corpse-spotted snake. Oh my God, how did they come here? Immediately, all the disciples retreated into the stone forest in a panic. A few disciples who couldn't escape in time were immediately entangled by dozens of poisonous snakes. They didn't even have time to wield their long swords before they were poisoned and fell to the ground. However, not long after they leaped onto the stone pillar, those poisonous snakes had already covered the entire stone forest. Not far away, the black figures had also walked to the surroundings of the stone forest. With a long roar, all the black figures stopped. Blood wolf! Only then did the disciples of Wuming Hall realize that the ferocious beasts that surrounded them were blood wolves. Moreover, the one that stood on the high ground and howled at the sky was a blood wolf king that was 3 times larger than an ordinary blood wolf. Seeing the poisonous snakes that covered the entire trial stone forest, the outer court disciples were already scared witless. Then looking at the thousands of blood wolves in all directions, the hearts of the outer court disciples sank to the bottom. At this time, there was a sudden change. The poisonous snakes all over the stone forest crawled up the stone pillars with their forked tongues. Those that couldn't climb up the stone pillars also coiled up, accumulating strength to shoot at the stone pillars. Not long after, a few huge pythons climbed up the stone pillars. The outer disciples of Wuming Hall were also capable. They used their own unique skills and cut off a few snake heads, temporarily saving their lives. Seeing that they couldn't succeed, the snakes slithered to the big trees in the stone forest. Many poisonous snakes wanted to attack the disciples of Wuming Hall from the big trees beside them. After a while, a few disciples who didn't have time to defend themselves were pounced on by the numerous poisonous snakes. Before they could scream, they lost their lives. However, these disciples were only a minority. Most of the disciples stayed on the stone pillars peacefully. Just when the disciples were a little relieved and wanted to rely on the stone pillars to wait until dawn, they saw a gap in the encirclement of the blood wolves. From the gap, a pair of huge beasts ran out. Mad elephant, mad mammoth, white bear. The huge figure immediately made it easy for the disciples to recognize it. The consequence of recognizing it was that their hearts no longer dared to have any extravagant hope. Sure enough, the huge mad mammoth rushed to the front of the stone pillar and rammed its head into the stone pillar. The stone pillar shook slightly from side to side, but it didn't fall down. The mad mammoth was just like its name. It kept ramming until its head was bleeding. It didn't stop until the stone pillar was knocked down. The disciples on the stone pillar were forced to jump to other stone pillars before it stopped. After a short rest, it immediately rushed to other stone pillars. It didn't take long for half of the stone pillar to be knocked down. Seeing this situation, the leading senior brother shouted, "Fellow junior brothers, let's join forces and rush to the south. Whoever can make it out alive should hurry to the Yulon Grand Canyon and inform the hall of this news." After he finished speaking, he took the lead and used his qing gong to rush into the blood wolves. When the other disciples heard this, they felt that it was reasonable. They jumped over the poisonous snakes and rushed into the blood wolves. The tall blood wolf king seemed to have known that this would happen. It roared towards the sky, and the other blood wolves also roared and rushed forward. The outer court disciples weren't as good as the Shuyu Hall disciples. Their martial arts were superior. In the beginning, they had some success and killed a lot of blood wolves. However, there were thousands of blood wolves surrounding them. The blood wolf king's roar attracted a lot of blood wolves. Not long after, the outer court disciples began to suffer casualties. Since there were casualties on the Yulon Prairie, many elite outer court disciples were fighting on their own. At first, although they had the upper hand, they didn't suffer any casualties. However, as more and more ferocious beasts surged, they also began to suffer casualties. Moreover, the casualties gradually became heavy. Thus, they began to think about gathering together to break out of the encirclement. However, in this pitch-black night, even if they wanted to release a smoke signal, they couldn't. In the extreme north, an inner court disciple in palace attire held a long sword. He was very relaxed under the siege of the blood wolves as he slowly moved towards the south. As he walked, he muttered to himself, "What's going on?" First there were howls. Then there was the blood wolf king. Could it be that something strange happened? These blood wolves are too much. They know that they are no match for me, but they still insist on fighting. Do they think they can keep me here with numbers? I've killed more than 100, but it seems that there are hundreds more. I haven't seen a single one in the past few days. Why did they all come out tonight? Forget it, I'd better go out first. I'll look at the other sisters and ask them what's going on. Just as she made a decision and was about to use her qing gong to leave, a gust of wind suddenly blew from her left hand. She couldn't see clearly in the pitch-black night. Just when she felt that something was wrong, a shadow flashed in front of her eyes.
This is...
Before she could react, she felt a pain in her throat and a touch of red came out of her body. The disciple touched the wound on her throat and her eyes were full of horror. Then she went limp on the spot and said unconfidently, "Yellow wind?" Immediately, a group of blood wolves split into two. The shadow like the wind didn't stop and continued to blow towards the far east. Qihua Forest, the camp of Pill Opening Hall. Like Shuyu Hall and Qianxu Hall, it was also attacked by the blood wolves. The three arhats were bitten to death by the thunder tigers and dismembered by the blood wolves. The bare-handed Pill Opening Hall disciples were like fish on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered by the blood wolves. However, in the corner of the campsite, in front of a huge tent, a dozen different ferocious beasts were roaring angrily. They wanted to charge into the tent, but they were blocked by an invisible object as soon as they approached the tent. No matter how hard they tried, they were blocked by something soft and soft. Inside the tent, 8 people were lying on the ground, trembling non-stop. They could only watch helplessly as the man-eating beasts kept charging in. Only their teeth were left to chatter with a gee sound. Suddenly, a disciple covered in blood crawled over, trembling as he tried to rush in, but he was still blocked outside. He heard the disciple shout, "Junior Brother Ren, I was wrong, save me!" It was Senior Brother Fan, who had just arrived at the tent that night and discovered the abnormality of the tent. Before Senior Brother Fan could finish his words, Thunder Tiger chased after him and bit his neck. There was a crack sound, and then there was no more movement. Seeing this frightening scene, everyone in the tent immediately closed their eyes. Their only wish was, "Junior Brother Ren, can you not let us hear your voice?" Chapter 649. Somewhere in the Yulon Grand Canyon, there was a remote area with sparse vegetation and strange stones all over the ground. Under the curtain of night, there was a slightly flat open space behind the huge stone. In front of a dozen tents, there were dozens of men and women quietly standing. Only to hear the trembling voice of a woman at the front. "Junior brother, you say, what is going on?" The tall man next to her also frowned. Looking at the huge stone in front of him, he said in a low voice, "Senior sister, I don't know either." However, listening to the roar of the beast, it seems to be in pain. Although we are lost here and can't see any beasts, we still have to be careful. It's still a long time before the Yulon dusk refinement ends. It's better to hide first. Well, last night I saw a few hidden caves on the mountain behind us. Why don't we hide there first? The man waved his hand and said, "Good. Disciples, quickly pack up and don't leave any traces behind. Quickly hide in the caves." The disciples behind him looked at each other in dismay. They really couldn't figure out why they were so serious. Among them, a younger male disciple walked towards a slim female disciple not far away. That female disciple also looked in their direction. Although there was no light at night, the two seemed to be able to see each other's eyes and read the panic in each other's heart. Next to the female disciple was another petite girl. She shrunk her shoulders and pulled the girl's hand. She lowered her voice and said, "Senior sister, let's go to the caves quickly. I'm scared here." The female disciple retracted her gaze and gently patted the girl's hand to comfort her. Then, she packed up with the others. When there was a faint light on the horizon, there were no traces behind the huge stone. It seemed that no one had ever been here. In the easternmost land, in the strange canyon, Chen Chen and Xianxia walked out under the white light. They said while walking, "Junior sister apprentice, this canyon is really strange. We got rid of the poisonous bees after a few turns." Then he stretched and yawned. "Last night I slept well. When I was adjusting my breathing, I seemed to hear the roar of a beast. I wonder what happened?" Xianxia smiled and said, "Little sister also heard it, and it seemed to have cried out many times. Who knows, this Yulon Grand Canyon is filled with ferocious beasts. It would be strange if it didn't cry out." Chen Chen nodded and looked at the entrance of the valley in the distance. He said, "The poisonous bees may not be guarding the entrance of the valley. I wonder if we can meet them when we go out?" Xianxia knew that Chen Chen just said it casually and didn't care about her answer. She smiled and said, "Yesterday, I panicked and didn't make any preparations. Today, Senior Sister Apprentice has made preparations early. Even if we meet again, There won't be any problem. Then he looked at the bright valley entrance and said, "We aren't any flowers or plants. Why would the poisonous bees guard us to death?" As the two of them talked, they walked into the valley entrance. When they turned a corner, they were stunned on the spot. There was indeed no black mass of poisonous bees in the sky, but on the ground, there was a black mass of ferocious beasts. From the teeth-eating rat, carnivorous beast, and human-faced monkey in the front, to the blood wolf, thunder tiger, and giant ape in the middle, as well as the fire lion, white bear, giant elephant, mammoth beast, and so on. Almost all the ferocious beasts that could be seen in the Yulon Grand Canyon were gathered here. Seeing this, Chen Chen's expression changed. Before Xianxia could react, he grabbed her hand and immediately flew to the side of the exit. Xianxia didn't dare to be negligent. She also operated her internal energy and used Qinggong to follow. When the group of beasts saw the two of them escaping, they all roared and immediately chased after them. Although Chen Chen was not afraid of these ferocious beasts, there were too many of them. Moreover, he was carrying Xianxia, whose martial arts were not very strong. Therefore, he could only rely on Qinggong to go to places where the beasts could not chase. It was not until the sky was bright that they gradually escaped the pursuit of the group of beasts. However, just when he was about to rest, he suddenly heard a clear voice in front of him. Chen Chen frowned and walked quickly for a moment. He jumped down a mountain stream and saw a woman in red holding a long sword, fighting a dozen thunder tigers and giant apes. Chen Chen did not dare to delay. He pulled Xianxia and jumped into the circle. Both of them held long swords and joined up with the female disciple. They killed the beasts together. When the female disciple saw that Chen Chen and Xianxia had come to help, she felt relieved and her swordsmanship became sharper. The three of them worked together and before long, they had killed most of the beasts. However, the remaining beasts still did not know fear and desperately surrounded the three of them. In the distance, there were even more beasts rushing over. When Chen Chen saw this, he knew that something was wrong and shouted, "Junior sister, let's go. We'll rush to the exit of the Yulon Grand Canyon and meet up with the other junior sisters along the way." After saying that, he waved his long sword and killed a few thunder tigers. He pulled Xianxia and rushed out. The other female disciple did not dare to stay behind and used Qinggong to rush out. The three of them rushed to the Yulon Grand Prairie like shooting stars. Behind them were countless beasts, roaring as they chased after them. At this time, on the eastern horizon, the blood-red sun gradually peeked out. When the first ray of sunlight shone into the cave, Xianxia, who was sitting cross-legged, opened his eyes. The starlight that shrouded the surroundings flashed and disappeared. Xianxia walked out of the cave and took a breath of the sun's essence. His heart suddenly jumped and he seemed to be a little vigilant. However, when he looked around, there was nothing different. His divine sense was also normal. So, he shrugged and practiced the Big Dipper magical fist as usual. However, when he finished practicing the fist technique, he frowned and found that there was something different. In this ordinary morning, there was always a mess of crisp bird calls. However, today it was dead silent. Not even a bird's cry could be heard. What happened? Xianxia secretly asked. However, looking from afar, the Pill Tower Hall's camp was also quiet and there was nothing different from usual. Maybe I'm thinking too much. Xianxia shook his head. There were many strange things in this Yulon Grand Canyon. This strange thing was nothing. However, when Xianxia used his Qinggong to return to the camp, everything in front of him made him dumbstruck. Yes, no words could describe his current state of mind. He saw that the entire camp was like a slaughterhouse. The solidified brown blood was splattered all over the ground. Occasionally, some pieces of flesh would stick to the tent. The entire camp was filled with the pungent smell of blood. However, when his divine sense swept through, other than a few pieces of bitten bones and some pieces of flesh, there was not even half a person's shadow in sight. Even the horses that were pulling the carriages were nowhere to be seen. What the hell happened? Could it be that we met? Xianxia did not dare to think deeper. At this time, suddenly from not far away, several blood wolves quietly scuttled out. They surrounded Xianxia from all directions. The corners of these blood wolves' mouths were still stained with blood. Seeing this, Xianxia was furious. He took out Chasing Dream from his bosom and threw it into the air. With a hand seal, Chasing Dream rushed towards the Bloodwolves. Although the Bloodwolves were ferocious, how could they be a match for the furious Zhang Xiaohua? In just a moment, their throats were pierced by Zhang Xiaohua and they died. Zhang Xiaohua recalled Chasing Dream and used his qinggong to return to his tent. After a few leaps and bounds, he saw the Bloodwolves quietly squatting in front of his tent. Zhang Xiaohua's heart was slightly relieved. After all, his restriction was still effective. If he could save a senior, then he was a senior. As he slowly walked towards his tent, Zhang Xiaohua's heart was filled with mixed feelings. Looking at the miserable state of the campsite, he knew that the hundreds of lives in the Pill Repository Hall had been lost in the strange birch forest. They had all been eaten by the ferocious beasts. Not even a complete corpse was left behind. This was the first time he had seen Bai Yefeng, Jing Shanfeng, and 3 Reed's Peak. Even though they were Bai Yefeng's seniors, he did not have much interaction with them. Other than the 8 people in his tent, he had not even spoken to the others. However, at this moment, Zhang Xiaohua felt a sense of guilt. If he had stayed in the campsite last night, perhaps this tragedy could have been avoided. Even if he had to risk his identity as an immortal Dao cultivator being exposed, he would have saved the lives of these hundreds of people. However, right after that, Zhang Xiaohua sighed again. Even if I stayed behind, would I be able to save them? Although he wanted to protect their safety, he didn't have the ability to protect the entire campsite with a formation. Even if he put a restriction on each of the tents, not to mention whether he had enough jade talismans, just the requirement of not letting them out of the tents would make him a laughingstock. Moreover, Zhang Xiaohua immediately thought of Senior Fan who had just left the tent last night. He had followed him for a few days, but in the end, he did not even spare him a glance, let alone the other seniors who followed behind the 3 arhats. Sigh. I'll just do my best. Zhang Xiaohua shook his head slightly. The heavy feeling of a mountain was slightly relaxed. Zhang Xiaohua's qinggong was superb. When he landed in front of the tent, the Bloodwolves and Lightning Tigers crouching in front of the tent did not notice him. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense entered the tent. When he saw that the 8 people were all safe and sound, he could not help but smile. Finally, the hard work he had put in every night to set up the formation had not been wasted. He had finally managed to save some disciples. At this moment, a lightning tiger discovered Zhang Xiaohua. With a roar, not only did it alert the surrounding beasts, even the people in the tent whose limbs were already numb opened their eyes in fright. When they saw Zhang Xiaohua walking towards the entrance of the tent, their eyes flashed with joy. Ever since they had been attacked by the beast tide last night, the only person they had been waiting for had finally appeared. However, when they saw a few Bloodwolves and Thunder Tigers running towards Zhang Xiaohua, their hearts immediately turned ice cold. Chapter 650. Seeing that everyone in the tent was looking at her, Zhang Xiaohua raised her hand and gestured with a confident smile. The smile was extremely faint, but in the eyes of Lu Chaoxian and the rest, it was an extremely strong confidence. In an instant, a firm belief rose in their hearts. They believed that this seemingly ordinary junior brother would definitely be able to give them an unexpected surprise. Sure enough, when Zhang Xiaohua leisurely walked towards the tent, 2 lightning tigers pounced on Zhang Xiaohua from both sides. However, Zhang Xiaohua was still as calm as before. She waved the short sword in her hand and in an instant, the lightning tiger's head was split open. Furthermore, she lifted her left leg and kicked the other lightning tiger's throat. Thump! The lightning tiger opened its mouth and fell to the ground. At this moment, the remaining lightning tigers and bloodwolves rushed over from the side. Seeing so many ferocious beasts attacking at the same time, Lu Chaoxian couldn't help but close his eyes. He had already seen this kind of tragedy countless times last night, and he really didn't want to be sad and fearful again. However, after a moment, he actually didn't hear any screams from Zhang Xiaohua. Instead, the screams of the ferocious beasts were heard. When did junior brother Ren become so brave? Lu Chaoxian couldn't help but mutter in his heart. Only when the screams outside the tent stopped, Lu Chaoxian couldn't help but open his eyes. As expected, several ferocious beasts were lying in a pool of blood and Zhang Xiaohua was still frowning as she walked towards the side of the tent. Lu Chaoxian was stunned. Could it be that there were more ferocious beasts at the side? But then, Zhang Xiaohua appeared at the entrance of the tent and walked in. The moment Zhang Xiaohua entered the tent, he was greeted with a nauseating stench. He looked at the floor and saw the vomit on the ground, as well as the horse's excrement in the corner of the tent. It made it impossible to enter the tent. Xianxia frowned and said, "Senior brothers, it's safe now. You can come out now." Lu Chaoxian, senior brother Wang, and the rest of the 8 had long gotten used to the aura inside the tent. When they saw Zhang Xiaohua standing at the entrance, they all rushed over. However, none of them dared to take a step outside the tent. Lu Chaoxian held Zhang Xiaohua's hand and asked in a hoarse voice, "Junior brother Ren, you're finally back." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "Yes, senior brother Lu, I'm sorry to trouble you. What is going on?" Upon hearing Zhang Xiaohua's question, everyone's eyes were filled with fear. No one was willing to say a word.
Alas!
Zhang Xiaohua sighed and said, "Come out and get some fresh air. There shouldn't be any ferocious beasts in the camp.
Don't worry."
Then she turned her head to look at the miserable camp and said, "I'll go look around to see if there are any other survivors." When senior brother Wang heard that she was going to leave, he grabbed her sleeve and said, "Junior brother Ren, don't go." Zhang Xiaohua forced a smile on her face and said, "Senior brother Wang, I'd better go and take a look. Maybe there are still survivors." Then she pushed his hand away and said, "If you're afraid, come with me." After that, she turned and walked to another place. When the others heard this, they all rushed to follow her. However, when they reached the entrance of the tent, they all stopped at the same time. The tent's function last night was really important. It saved the lives of the 8 people. Now that they were suddenly asked to leave, no one dared to take a step forward. Zhang Xiaohua didn't turn her head. She saw the actions of the 8 people with her divine sense and sighed inwardly. She didn't force them and directly walked to the tent at the side. This was the tent of an ordinary disciple of the Pill Tower Hall. The things inside were simple. There were only some bedding and a pile of jade boxes. There was also a carriage in the corner of the tent and the ground was covered in blood. Not even a bone was left. Zhang Xiaohua took a look and turned to leave. However, her heart skipped a beat and she looked at the pile of jade boxes on the ground. After pondering for a long time, she cupped her hands and said, "Senior brothers, you've been busy for a long time and only have these few herbs. It's a waste to leave them here. I'll take them today. If I meet any ferocious beasts on the way back, I'll kill them as revenge for you." After she finished speaking, she sighed and kept the jade boxes with the herbs into the belt around her waist. If these herbs were left here, they might not be well preserved even if someone came back 5 years later. Furthermore, after the bloodbath at the Quiet Orchid Twilight Refinement, it was still unknown if the strange birch forest would be the next location. Zhang Xiaohua took the herbs herself and it was the best choice. However, only the heavens knew where the ferocious beasts that attacked the strange birch forest were. Zhang Xiaohua's wish was just a little peace of mind. The rest of the tents were like this one. There were only bloodstains on the ground and not even bones could be seen. How could there be any survivors? Zhang Xiaohua walked one round carefully. Her face was ashen and she didn't have the joy of obtaining so many spiritual herbs from before. When she returned to her tent, the 8 people finally came out. However, they were all half kneeling on the ground and vomiting. They had already vomited everything they ate last night. How could there be anything left for them to vomit? However, the miserable situation in front of them directly stimulated their eyes and their bodies. The overwhelming reaction in their bodies forced them to vomit yellow and green things. Zhang Xiaohua stood beside them and waited quietly. After a long while, Lu Chaoxian forced himself to stand up. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua, who was as calm as a mountain, he couldn't help but ask with a trace of expectation, "Is there anyone else?" Zhang Xiaohua didn't answer and shook her head silently. Lu Chaoxian raised his eyes to look at the rising sun and muttered, "More than 500 people, just like that. All gone. Perhaps it's not just that." Although Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand what had happened, after thinking about it, she already knew that this definitely wasn't just something that happened in the strange birch forest. Perhaps Wuming Hall, Chenkuan Hall, Shuyu Hall and even the inner disciples were all unavoidable. Lu Chaoxian obviously didn't think so much. At this time, after hearing Zhang Xiaohua's words, his frightened brain gradually started to move. Junior brother Ran is saying, then wouldn't there be thousands of lives? At this time, Senior brother Wang and the others also forced themselves to gather around. When they heard this, they almost couldn't believe it. Impossible! Only yellow wind and black lightning from hundreds of years ago caused such a big trouble. They were all worshipped by the inner disciples. However, when they said this, not only senior brother Wang, but also the others also remembered the terrifying roar that was directly reflected in their hearts last night. Instantly, the 8 people's originally pale faces were filled with fear. Seeing this, Xianxia wanted to ask, but in this situation, how could she ask? After thinking for a while, she asked, "Senior brothers, there are no survivors in this entire camp. Even if there are no corpses left, I don't think this is a place to stay for long. How about?" Lu Chaoxian nodded. Junior brother Ran is right. Let's hurry back to the Yulon Grand Canyon. Only by leaving from there, we can be safe. Everyone had already lost their sense of propriety. Without thinking about the dangers, they all immediately agreed. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, "It's not appropriate to go out now. This strange birch forest was just attacked by fierce beasts. They probably won't come back in a short period of time. We can only stay here to be safe. Moreover, we don't know what happened outside the strange birch forest. It's not appropriate to go out rashly. Of course, we definitely can't stay in this camp. Junior brother has been spending the night in that cave for the past few days. Why don't we hide there for a few days and see the situation first?" Lu Chaoxian and the others all applauded and urged Zhang Xiaohua to lead the way. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly. "Senior brothers don't know Qinggong. If you don't have a horse, how can you reach the canyon? It's better to pack up and set up the carriage. It won't be too late to leave with junior brother." Lu Chaoxian and the others suddenly realized. They all secretly patted their heads and hurriedly led the frightened horses out of the tent. They put away the things in the tent, including the tent. Then, under Zhang Xiaohua's guidance, they came to the cave. The cave wasn't very big and could only accommodate a few people, let alone horses. Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to find a few caves nearby and settled everyone in the carriage properly. The few of them were mentally exhausted. They ate a little and felt drowsy. However, they were constantly alert and startled. In the end, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to give each of them a finger and hit their sleeping acupoints. Only then did they calm down. After settling Lu Chaoxian and the others, Zhang Xiaohua immediately flew to the camp. He released his divine sense and carefully checked again. He really hoped that he could save 1 or 2 people. However, he was still disappointed. After confirming that there were no living people in this camp, Zhang Xiaohua followed the direction of the bloodstains and went all the way. He saw that the bloodstains were heading in the direction of the Pill Expansion Hall's carriage. Along the way, torn bloody clothes were blown by the mountain wind and there were also some broken bones. As he went further, the bloodstains faded and gradually disappeared. When he reached the swamps and other places, the footprints of the beasts were also messy. He didn't know where they went. Raising his head and seeing that it was still early, Zhang Xiaohua took out some primeval stones and leaped into the air, flying towards Chui Hanliang Ridge. Zhang Xiaohua flew very low, wanting to take a closer look at the situation along the way. But along the way, other than the occasional bloodstains and tattered clothes, and the weapons that had been thrown to the side, he didn't see any other beasts. Looking at the blood-stained weapons, Zhang Xiaohua knew that those who had died in the mouths of the beasts must have been the outer sect disciples who had entered the trial. When Zhang Xiaohua lowered his head to check, he suddenly heard a bird's cry above his head. When he looked up, he saw a huge eagle crying and swooping towards him. Chapter 651. Seeing that they did not speak, Xianxia said, "Of course we can't just stay here. If we do, we will only be besieged by more beasts. I don't know if our signal can contain other information. It's best to tell them our itinerary and let them draw closer to our route according to their own actual situation. Furthermore, by doing this, if the other disciples are still alive, they should be able to regroup with us inner disciples and have a higher chance of survival." Chen Chen thought for a moment and said, "Except for Xianxia, we all have a signal firework in our hands. You can write a few simple words in it. Let's do it this way. Let's first send a signal here, then send another signal to another place, and so on. I think the other junior sisters only need to use their brains a little to know our route, right?" Xianxia did not say anything. She turned to look at the other senior sisters. The other disciples looked at Xianxia and seemed to have something to say, but when they heard Chen Chen's words, they frowned slightly. One of them murmured, "Junior sister Xianxia is right. However, with our martial arts and lightness skills, it's not a problem for us to escape from danger. Once the signal is sent, there will be a lot of outer disciples and ordinary disciples coming. Their martial arts are average or even have no martial arts. At that time, they will be a burden to us. If something happens to them, do you think we should save them or not?" At this time, Xianxia said, "No matter if it's an inner disciple, an outer disciple, or an ordinary disciple, after all, we are all disciples of the fragrance cult. We should save as many as we can. Besides, we inner disciples are strong in martial arts. Shouldn't we help them?" The other female disciples looked at Chen Chen and did not speak. It seemed that only Xianxia, who had just entered the inner disciple, could say such words. Outer disciples? They were just the servants of the family. Who would worry about their life and death? Chen Chen was also out of ideas. She usually did not care about trifles. She was too lazy to take care of trivial things, let alone this kind of decision-making. Racking her brains had never been her strong point. She could not help but look at Xixia's face again. Xixia still carefully glanced at the other female disciples. Biting her lips, she advised, "Senior Sister Chen, it's always right to have strength in numbers. If all the senior sisters gather together, we can take care of each other. Even if we encounter something difficult, we can work together. Saving an outer sect disciple is as easy as lifting a finger. It would be best if we could save them, but even if we can't, we'll still do our best. We can't let the outer sect hall masters go back and say that we're cold-blooded and heartless, right? These hall masters are all inner sect disciples of the older generation." Speaking of the outer sect's hall master, not only Chen Chen, but the other female disciples were also surprised. Although the outer sect disciples were nothing much, their hall masters were all inner sect disciples. They could directly participate in the affairs of the fragrant cult. Although they couldn't directly order the inner sect disciples around, when it came to the hierarch, it would always make the hierarch a little unhappy. Forget it. It's just a matter of extending a hand. It doesn't take much effort. At the critical moment, we still have to save our own lives. We've done our best. Who knows if we can do our best? The rest of the people thought so. So, Chen Chen nodded and said, "Well, then we'll do as junior sister Xianxia said. I'll go and release the signal." Everyone was stunned. "So fast? Don't you want to rest for a while?" "This." Chen Chen scratched his head and said, "Can't we do it now?" "Xianxia, when do you want to release the signal?" Xianxia rolled her eyes and said with a smile, "How about at night? These beasts have been causing trouble for a day and a night. They're probably tired at night. We can just do it. Moreover, the signal at night can see further and there will be more disciples who can find it." "Good, that's it." Chen Chen clapped his hands and said. The other disciples were speechless. Who was the senior sister? In another place of the Yulon Grand Canyon, inside a cave, several male and female disciples stood behind the entrance of the cave and looked at the occasional herd of beasts in the distance. The older female disciple said, "Junior brother Zhao, this situation doesn't seem right. A few days ago, we didn't encounter any beasts at all. How come there are so many beasts running in front of us in just half a day?" The male disciple also smiled bitterly. "Senior Sister Xia, I don't understand. We chose a place with few people because we wanted to find some rare treasures. Looking at the situation, it seems like we're going to fail." Senior Sister Xia sighed. "Man proposes, God disposes. Let's wait and see." After a long time, the sky was already completely dark. Suddenly, from somewhere in the Yulon Grand Canyon, a huge signal soared into the sky. The gorgeous colors illuminated half of the sky, and within the signal, there were two huge words, "Canyon Entrance." "Look. Junior brother Zhao. This seems to be the signal used by the inner disciples during the trial on Lingering Fragrance Peak?" "That's right, Senior Sister Xia. This is what the hall master told us before we set off. But what does this signal mean? I heard that the inner disciples don't use any signals." Senior Sister Xia nodded. "It seems like the situation here is very dangerous. Is the two words Canyon Entrance telling us to gather at the canyon entrance or hurry to the canyon entrance. When junior brother Zhao heard this, he became anxious and said, How many days have we been in here? We haven't even picked anything yet. How can we get out so easily? Senior sister Xia seemed to be in a difficult position. On another mountain peak, Xianxia was also meditating with his eyes closed. He was comprehending the heavenly Tao in his heart. When the signal appeared in the sky, his heart was moved. He immediately opened his eyes and looked at the indistinct signal in the sky. He was stunned. What is this? Isn't the signal for help a smoke signal? However, he didn't dare to be negligent. He was afraid that he would miss something, so he jumped up and hurried to find Lu Chaoxian and the rest in the cave. After waking everyone up, Lu Chaoxian and the others had recovered quite a bit after a whole day of sleep. Seeing that it was already late, their hearts couldn't help but skip a beat. They hurriedly asked, Junior brother Ren, did the ferocious beasts attack again? Xianxia shook his head and said, No, the surroundings are very safe. I didn't see any ferocious beasts. Moreover, when you were sleeping, I went out to take a look. There are indeed many ferocious beasts in the surroundings. I don't know why they all ran out. Lu Chaoxian and the rest's faces changed. When they were about to ask again, Xianxia hurriedly stopped them and said, Let's not talk about this first. Quickly come and take a look. What is this? After he finished speaking, he led everyone out and pointed at the signal in the distance. When Lu Chaoxian saw it, he was also uncertain. He turned his head and asked, Junior brother Wang, look. Is this the communication method of the inner disciples? This. Senior brother Wang was also uncertain. All the disciples beside him were also confused. In the end, Lu Chaoxian could only smile bitterly and say, Junior brother Ren, we are also not sure about this. It seems to be a method that inner sect disciples use to communicate with each other. It's just that. I don't think the inner sect disciples have anything to do with us ordinary disciples. This signal is probably not directed at us. Senior brother Wang also said, the communication of the inner disciples, we have only heard about it. We have never seen it with our own eyes. Moreover, they almost never communicate. Is that so? Xianxia rubbed her chin thoughtfully. Lu Chaoxian immediately raised his eyebrows and said anxiously, Could it be that the inner disciples were also attacked by the ferocious beasts, so they sent the message? Everyone was also delighted. However, when they looked at the signal that was so far away that they couldn't reach it, their faces became gloomy. Yes, the signal was really too far away. It was already good that they could see it. If it was daytime, even if they wanted to see it, they wouldn't be able to see it clearly. Xianxia was happy and said, Senior brothers, why are you so depressed? Isn't this a good time for us to go out? Lu Chaoxian was stunned and puzzled. The distance from here to the inner disciples is no less than 100 miles. We don't even know the high mountains and flowing rivers. How can we get there in time? Xianxia smiled and didn't say anything. Senior brother Wang next to her whispered, Junior brother Ren means that we can go back the same way tomorrow? Lu Chaoxian was not stupid. He was just distracted by the signal. At this time, when he heard senior brother Wang's hint, he couldn't help but be happy. He clapped his hands and laughed. Oh, I am. Seeing this guy so happy that he forgot himself, Xianxia quickly stopped him. Senior brother Lu, lower your voice. Don't forget that there may be ferocious beasts nearby. Lu Chaoxian was shocked and quickly shut his mouth. He looked around at the darkness with lingering fear and then said in the smallest voice, Junior brother Wang is right. The signal of the inner disciples can not only attract the disciples of the fragrance cult, but also the ferocious beasts of the entire canyon. I think this is a good opportunity. Let's go back the same way we came. At this time, everyone was shocked. Their faces were full of hope as they looked at Xianxia. Xianxia shook her head and said, I think it's better not to go back the same way. After all, the way in and out of the Spirit Orchid Prairie is a detour. When we came, we avoided the ferocious beasts. At this time, those ferocious beasts may not be there. Moreover, if we take a detour, we will definitely encounter more ferocious beasts. It's just that. Lu Chaoxian said, Junior brother Ren's words are very reasonable. It's just that what? Xianxia said shyly, It's just that junior brother doesn't know the way. As for how to go, I still need senior brothers to lead the way. Everyone collapsed. After a while, Xianxia said, Junior brother Ren, you don't have to worry about this problem. In fact, half of the journey is clearly marked. Only when we reach the Yulon Prairie can we walk in a straight line. At that time, we can go straight south. That's good, that's good. Xianxia nodded. Since it's decided, pack up. We'll leave early tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning? Senior brother Wang was stunned. He couldn't wait to leave this place as soon as possible. That's right. You've all slept for a day, but I haven't rested yet. After I sleep well, we'll set off tomorrow. Xianxia seemed to be very innocent. Chapter 652. The next morning, when Xianxia woke up and walked out of the cave, she was surprised to find that the other 8 people had packed their horses and carriages and were all sitting in the carriages, waiting for her. Seeing Xianxia come out, Xianxia, who was anxiously pacing left and right, hurriedly walked forward and pointed to the sky in the distance. Junior brother Ren. Look. In the wee hours of this morning, the inner court disciples sent out the same signal. However, we were too far away and couldn't see the content clearly. Xianxia took a look and indeed, the signal from last night was still in mid-air, but it was much dimmer. The signal that was sent out just now was at a place far away from it. What's going on? Xianxia was puzzled and asked, was it sent by 2 groups of people? Were they both attacked by ferocious beasts? Senior brother Wang, who was beside, also walked forward. Just now senior brother Lu and I have already thought about it. It could also be sent by the same person, or it could be indicating her route. Telling others the route, to lure the ferocious beasts to attack? Xianxia was puzzled at first, but then she thought of something and nodded. Perhaps it's the latter. This way it can also allow the surrounding disciples to rush over together. But this has nothing to do with us. Let's go, senior brothers. Let's set off now. All the disciples had long been waiting for this sentence, and when they heard Xianxia speak, they were all overjoyed. The 4 carriages under Xianxia's lead sped down the mountain slope. Xianxia stood straight in front. The 7 disciples at the back looked on and their hearts were filled with a sense of security. The campsite in Qihua Forest was a place they had to pass by. As they walked past, Xianxia couldn't help but turn back and asked, Junior brother Ren, there's really no one in this campsite. Xianxia was sad and said, Yes, I've already checked carefully 3 times. Not to mention people, even the horses that pulled the carriages, not even their bones were left behind. Sigh, let's go. Ja, Xianxia raised his whip high and with a crack, it was as if he wanted to dispel the sorrow in his heart. After passing through Qihua Forest and going up a gentle slope, it was the place that Xianxia had explored yesterday. At this time, it was deserted. Just like when they first arrived, there were no ferocious beasts, but Xianxia still didn't dare to be careless. Standing in front of the carriage felt uneasy. With a leap, she reached the roof of the carriage. Xianxia didn't know that, when the disciples behind saw this, their hearts were calm. The mountain road was steep and uneven. Xianxia was still able to stand steadily on the roof of the carriage. This was something that they couldn't even dream. However, was this just Xianxia's reason to make them feel at ease? Everyone had other explanations in their hearts. Yesterday, Xianxia was riding the wind, so naturally she was very fast. At this time, driving the carriage, it took her a whole morning to reach Chui Hanliang Ridge. This journey was considered stable, similar to the previous one. A few old and weak ferocious beasts were easily dealt with by Xianxia. Even the giant crocodile beast that suddenly appeared in the swamp couldn't escape Xianxia's divine sense. Just as the giant crocodile beast stuck its head out and wanted to attack the horses pulling the carriage, Xianxia used the jade water sword to pierce one of its eyes, and it immediately fled back into the swamp, not daring to show its head again. Seeing Xianxia's courage, Xianxia, senior brother Wang and the others were more and more relieved, and their mood gradually relaxed. Seeing Chui Hanliang Ridge in front of them, Xianxia couldn't help but ask, Junior brother Ren, how do you think we should get to Chui Hanliang Ridge? If we go now, we will have to find a place to sleep at night. Won't it be dangerous? Xianxia smiled, pointed to the continuous mountain range, and said, Let's go, senior brother Lu. If there is danger, We can't avoid it even during the day, let alone at night. Although his voice wasn't loud, it was filled with confidence, causing everyone's courage to tremble. Everyone drove the carriage to Chui Hanliang Ridge. At this time, Chen Chen's team had expanded a lot, and there were more than 10 inner disciples who had rushed over to join them. In this way, Chen Chen's pressure was greatly reduced. After all, she saw her junior sister alive, and since there were no casualties, the strength they gathered was of course very powerful. There were quite a number of outer disciples who had rushed over after seeing the signal, but they were in a more miserable state. Almost half of them were injured and had barely managed to rush over. Seeing the miserable state of these disciples, Chen Chen was rather moved and felt that her decision was correct. However, just as she was feeling somewhat pleased with herself, she heard a disciple call out, "Senior Sister Chen, look ahead." Chen Chen looked ahead, and saw that in the southern sky, there was a group of birds flying over like a dark cloud, and below the birds, there was a cloud of dust. It was a large group of ferocious beasts rushing over, but it was not clear how many there were and what kind of beasts they were. Chen Chen's face was cold, and she said with a cold smile, "Good, it seems that our signal is really useful. There are wild beasts that let us find them. Junior sisters, get ready, and let the outer disciples see the power of our inner disciples." The inner disciples were also calm, and they all smiled and said, "Yes, senior sister." Looking at their joyful expressions, it seemed that the birds and beasts that were pouncing towards them were just a game. The surrounding outer sect disciples who were chasing after them with their qing gong felt endless yearning in their hearts. What was their purpose in coming here? Wasn't it to fight for a spot that could allow them to enter the inner sect? And these inner disciples who were obviously much younger than them were about to show them the martial arts goal they were pursuing. The flying beasts came over quickly, and in a short while, they were in front of them. White-headed eagle, lion-roaring vulture, golden eagle, fire lion, thunder leopard, thunder tiger. The outer disciples were all dumbfounded. These were rare beasts, and now they had all appeared in front of them. If it was before today, they might have been happy, or perhaps they would have formed a group to besiege one of the beasts, and worked hard for a certain number of points. But now, besides being shocked, they could only pray that the inner disciples could kill these beasts so that they could escape with their lives. "Senior Sister Chen, I'm here." "Junior Sister, I'm here too." Just as the flying beasts were approaching, another 4 inner disciples came from the side. Seeing this, Chen Chen was overjoyed and said, "Good, everyone get into position. Sisters of the inner disciples, use your best martial arts skills and kill the most powerful of these beasts. Disciples of the outer disciples, pick the beasts that you can deal with, kill as many as you can. Our feast has just begun." "Yes, Senior Sister Chen." The disciples roared, all of them holding swords and sabers, according to the prearranged formation, pushed forward, and collided with the incoming flying beasts. Chen Chen, as the leader of the group, naturally walked at the front. The sword in her hand shook, and like a peacock, a foot-long sword light shot out. She tiptoed slightly and rushed into the air, directly stabbing at the white-headed eagle in front of her. The white-headed eagle was huge. When it saw someone rushing over, it flapped its wings that were a few feet long. A gust of wind blew, and it rushed towards Chen Chen who was in the air. Along with the gust of wind, the white-headed eagle stretched out its beak and pecked at Chen Chen's weak point. Unexpectedly, when Chen Chen saw the white-headed eagle's wings flapping, not only did she not dodge, but she pulled her body up again. She gave up the front of the white-headed eagle and rushed towards its wings. When the white-headed eagle saw that it was rushing towards its wings, it seemed to be disdainful. The strongest part of the white-headed eagle was its wings. The feathers were like iron plates, and as long as an ordinary weapon touched them, they would be destroyed. Unfortunately, the white-headed eagle had only encountered an ordinary weapon. When the flashing sword light cut off the wings that it was so proud of like paper, the entire bird lost its balance and fell to the ground. It still didn't understand the reason behind it. Chen Chen cut off half of the white-headed eagle's wings, but did not stop. She was about to stab forward again, but at this time, the internal force in her body stagnated and her body fell. Before she could take a breath, a golden eagle next to her seemed to see an opportunity. It swooped down and pecked at her waist. When Chen Chen saw this, she sneered. She took a breath and waved the soft sword in her hand. It really hit the eagle's body, almost cutting it in half. Then she used the force to fly up again, and raised her sword to stab at another white-headed eagle. The white-headed eagle screeched, quickly dodged, and attacked another disciple. When Chen Chen saw that her attack had failed, she did not pursue it. Her body changed again, and she stabbed at another large bird. When the dodging white-headed eagle was 3 feet away from the nearest disciple, the disciple waved her hand. The white-headed eagle seemed to have been hit in the air, and its wings flapped forward, trying to stop its body. Unfortunately, the disciple waved her hand, and the white-headed eagle involuntarily rushed forward. The disciple did not do anything, but a seemingly ordinary long sword stabbed out. With a light poochie sound, it pierced the white-headed eagle's chest. The white-headed eagle let out a mournful cry and died. The female disciple waved her hand, and an invisible rope flew from the white-headed eagle's neck and returned to her hand. Seeing that Chen Chen and the flock of birds had killed 2 ferocious beasts and forced one to dodge, and this white-headed eagle was also easily stabbed to death by their own junior sister, all the disciples' spirits were lifted. Each of them took out their own unique skills, and killed the birds in the sky and the beasts on the ground. In the sky going from west to east, a yellow figure that was almost invisible was flying towards the east like the wind. As that small figure flew, it tilted its ears, as if it was listening to something. Its extremely intelligent eyes flashed with anxiety and an indescribable sadness. In another place inside a cave, senior sister Xia said anxiously, "Junior brother Zhao, the inner disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak have already gone far away. If we chase after them now, maybe we can still make it." Junior brother Zhao still shook his head. "Senior sister Xia, before we came, the hall master had already told us to listen to my arrangements. Although senior sister's considerations are reasonable, as the ancient saying goes, wealth comes from danger. Now that the inner disciples have lured away the ferocious beasts, it is a good opportunity for us to make a move. Don't you think so?" Chapter 653. This. Senior sister Xia frowned and didn't know how to answer. She had already tactfully expressed her thoughts, but junior brother Zhao was still stubborn. What else could she say? So she could only ask, "Then according to junior brother Zhao, what should we do next?" "Wait." Junior brother Zhao said confidently, "Wait until they are far away, then we'll make our move." Senior sister Xia, I'll have to trouble you to inform the other brothers to rest at ease. When the time is right, we'll go down the mountain to search for treasures. All right, junior brother Zhao should also rest and recover his energy. Senior sister Xia helplessly walked out. Compared to the fierce beasts that Chen Chen and the others faced, Xianxia was abnormally relaxed. A few vultures and badger pigs foraging for food in Hansue Ridge were just a warm-up dish for him. In fact, Xianxia should still thank Chen Chen for the signal. If it wasn't for this signal that led the birds and beasts in Yulon Grand Canyon to their side, it would have been difficult for Xianxia to protect the 9 people safely. Indeed, just like before, 4 badger pigs rushed toward the carriage at the same time. Although Xiaohua's figure was fast, he could only cut down 3 of them in a short time. The last one almost bit the last horse pulling the carriage. If Xiaohua hadn't been quick-witted and used the small sword as a hidden weapon, the last carriage would have had to be abandoned. At night, the stars twinkled and the full moon shone high in the sky. Xiaohua led everyone to a slightly wide mountain ridge and said with a smile, "Senior brother Lu, let's stop here for today. It's time to rest." Ha! Lu Chaoyun was a little surprised and said, "Junior brother Ren, our time is precious. If we don't need to rest, then don't rest. Let's take advantage of the night when there are no fierce beasts attacking and continue for a while." Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua didn't speak, he said, "Even if we need to rest, we still need to walk for a while. We're not tired now." Zhang Xiaohua sighed and said, "Senior martial brother Lu, you're not tired, but this little brother is. It's going to be midnight soon, so you should let this little brother have a good sleep before midnight, right?" When Lu Chaoxian heard this, he hurriedly jumped off the carriage and apologized. Junior brother Ren, please don't blame me. I was only thinking about myself and forgot about you. You were exploring and protecting us during the day. You were really exhausted." When senior brother Wang and the others heard this, they hurriedly alighted from the carriage and directed the tents to be set up again. Looking at the tents that had been set up, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Senior brothers, just like before, all of you will stay in the tents and bring the horses in. I will help you guard outside. I guarantee that nothing will be able to hurt you. Lu Chaoxian nodded and said, we naturally believe junior brother Ren's words. It's just that the outer sanctum's reputation is high. Won't junior brother be with us? Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, there's no need. I can rest outside and keep watch at night. It's just right. Then, she looked at the other senior brothers who were about to enter the tents and said in a low voice, Senior Marshal Brother Lu, I'm sure you're all wondering why the ferocious beasts didn't enter the tents to eat you at night? When Senior Marshal Brother Lu heard this, he laughed and said, I won't hide it from Junior Marshal Brother. I was so scared last night that I didn't have time to think about anything. It was only when I escaped with my life that I thought about it. It's just that, the reason. Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said, you don't need to know the reason. What you all need to do now is to think of a foolproof plan to make our hall master believe that we didn't rely on this tent to escape the attack of the ferocious beasts. Then her tone became stern. I saved everyone on account of the fact that we're all senior martial brothers of Tianmu Peak. I don't want anyone to repay kindness with enmity. Otherwise, even if I don't leave now, once we reach Tianmu Peak, with my methods, I'm sure Senior Marshal Brother Lu will know what will happen. Lu Chaoxian shuddered slightly. To be honest, he was finding it harder to see through this junior martial brother. Previously, he felt that he could be compared to Chen Fengxiao, Headmaster Chen. Then, he felt that he could be compared to Lu Lihong, Senior Marshal Brother Lu. But today, looking at him, he was not inferior to the outstanding outer disciples. Furthermore, he had a secret that could prevent the ferocious beasts from entering the tents. Who could he be compared to? Perhaps an inner disciple. But Lu Chaoxian didn't have the qualifications to meet an inner disciple. He couldn't make a direct comparison. Lu Chaoxian bowed deeply and said respectfully, Junior Marshal Brother Ren saved the lives of the 8 of us. Even if we're worse than pigs and dogs, we will definitely not reveal this matter. Well, I've thought about it on the way. I'll discuss it with them later and unify our statements. Tomorrow morning, I'll definitely give Junior Marshal Brother a satisfactory answer. Zhang Xiaohua didn't return the salute. She just smiled and said, well said, well said. I know Senior Marshal Brother Lu must have a good idea. After that, she invited Lu Chaoxian to return to the tent. She took out a rush cushion and sat cross-legged in front of the tent, closing her eyes and saying nothing. When it was almost midnight, Zhang Xiaohua cast a restriction on the tent and around her rush cushion. Then she began to cultivate. The essence of the world in Hansue Ridge was more abundant than usual. The starlight was also dense. It was a great place for cultivation. In the place where Chen Chan and Zixia were, after an afternoon of hard fighting, the flock of birds and beasts were finally wiped out. There were no major casualties among the inner disciples. Only a few disciples were slightly injured. They had the Yuhuandan pill to heal their wounds, so the minor injuries were nothing. Although the outer disciples were in the inner circle and only dealt with ordinary beasts, there were still many disciples who lost their lives. It wasn't until night came that they could take a breather and tidy up their terrible mood. Night had fallen. The disciples of the fragrance cult gathered together. The inner disciples were in the inner circle, quietly adjusting their breathing. The fighting during the day was very shameful. Although it consumed a lot of internal energy, it also had an impact on the improvement of their martial arts. They recovered their physical strength and internal energy while absorbing and digesting what they had gained today. It had to be said that it was also a way of cultivation. The outer disciples were on guard outside. The campsite was surrounded by bonfires. Their whereabouts had been exposed, so they didn't have to worry about being discovered by the birds and beasts. The light of the fire would make it easier for the other disciples to find them. At midnight, another 4 inner court disciples and 10 outer court disciples arrived. In another place in the dark, a voice asked, Junior Marshal Brother Zhao, why did you call me here? Junior Marshal Brother Zhao smiled and said, it's late. I'm sorry to disturb Senior Marshal Sister Xia's rest. It's okay. I rested enough during the day. I'm just meditating and cultivating now. Are the other disciples the same? Yes, they've all been cooped up in the cave for the whole day. They shouldn't be sleepy. That's good. Senior Marshal Sister Xia, we've been hiding here for the whole day. It's time to change our location. Moreover, It's less likely that we'll be discovered at night. What do you think? Okay, I'll listen to Junior Marshal Brother Zhao's instructions. I just don't know which direction we should go this time. Junior Marshal Brother Zhao thought for a moment and said, let's go east. Only the inner disciples have been there before. There should be treasures there. Okay, I'll wake them up and let's go immediately. Seeing Senior Marshal Sister Xia, Junior Marshal Brother Zhao's face immediately showed a trace of a smile. In the night sky, the yellow shadow finally stopped and landed on a mountain. The spring water on the mountain dripped down. In the bushes, there was a scarlet fruit trembling slightly in the wind. When the yellow shadow saw it, its eyes lit up and it flew forward like a gust of wind. At this moment, a huge shadow appeared from the side. It was the monster that was guarding the spirit fruit. However, when the monster saw the yellow shadow, it immediately lowered its huge head as if it had seen its king. Following which, it let out a few low growls as if it was greeting its king. The small shadow let out a low cry and responded with a few cries. Then, it flew to the front of the spirit fruit and opened its mouth. The vermilion spirit fruit seemed to be pulled by something as it was thrown straight into the shadow's mouth. Then, the yellow shadow raised its head and looked at the bright moon in the sky. It seemed to be cultivating as it inhaled and exhaled an invisible moonlight. The huge monster stood obediently not far away and looked around vigilantly. It was actually guarding the yellow shadow. The next morning, Xianxia opened her eyes and finished her daily routine. Only then did she remove the restriction outside the tent. When she went in to take a look, she saw that everyone had already packed up and were waiting for Xianxia to come in. Xianxia rubbed her nose and smiled. Good morning, Senior Marshal Brothers. It seems like you slept well last night. When Lu Chao saw that Xianxia was in a good mood, he was also happy and said, with Junior Brother Ren guarding the outer sect, we naturally slept soundly. It has been hard on Junior Marshal Brother. Everyone agreed. Xianxia smiled but did not say anything. When Senior Marshal Brother Wang saw this, he stepped forward and said, Junior Brother Ren's kindness to us is as heavy as a mountain. Especially me, I have already saved him twice. As the saying goes, a drop of water should be repaid with a spring. I don't dare to say how much I can repay Junior Marshal Brother, but regarding Junior Marshal Brother's instructions, I will definitely do it. When he finished, he immediately swore a poison oath. Xianxia nodded slightly. What else could he ask for? The person who would not reveal a secret the most was a dead person. But she wanted to save them. How could she do it? Since that was the case, she could only choose to believe. The other 7 people, including Lu Chao, also swore a poison oath. In the end, Lu Chao said, last night we had a discussion. Actually, it's easy to deal with. We can say that we were helping Junior Brother Ren to pick the 100-year-old ice soul grass, so we didn't stay at the campsite and only stayed in the cave. Anyway, the Senior Marshal Brothers who came are all gone. Whatever we say, won't it be up to us? Senior Marshal Brother Wang continued. Moreover, in the entire pill-expanding hole, perhaps only the 9 of us will return. We are considered heroes to have survived the beast's attack. The Hall Master can't wait to care for us. Why would he investigate further? Xianxia nodded and said, that's true. If he blindly interrogates, it will definitely disappoint the brothers. All right, we will listen to Senior Marshal Brothers. Let's hurry and set off. Chapter 654. Hansue Ridge was very happy. The one-line sky that was blocked at that time had not changed. The boulder thrown by Xianxia on the side of the road was still standing in the wind. When the carriage passed by, Lu Chaoxian sighed and said, these beasts are so fierce, but I don't know if the disciples who helped us at that time are still safe. I hope they won't be eaten by the beasts. Bad luck. Xianxia rubbed her nose and kept complaining in her heart. I, Xiaoxia, have saved you many times. Why don't you want me to be well? She had to say, they are good at martial arts. They will be fine. That's not necessarily true. Lu Chaoxian looked like an expert and said, this boulder only means that they have strength, but it doesn't mean that they are good at martial arts. What's the use of having strength when facing so many beasts? Damn! Xianxia stood on the roof of the carriage and almost fell down. She said secretly, Well, I won't say anything, okay? At this time, she heard Lu Chaoxian say with a smile, if those disciples are as good as junior brother Ren's martial arts, they may be able to get away. Alas, I was defeated. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and stopped talking. After all, they were the same person. At this time, Chen Chen and others also got up and were ready to go. Chen Chen asked in a low voice, Junior Sister Xianxia, do you think we should send the signal again today? Xianxia said softly, of course, Senior Sister Chen. On the one hand, we should let the senior sisters who didn't come see our route. On the other hand, we should tell them that we are very safe here.
Okay. I'll listen to you.
After Chen Chen finished speaking, he took a signal from another female disciple and held it in his right hand. He took out a finger-sized stone from his arms with his left hand and held it in his hand. Then he used his internal strength in his left hand to draw something with difficulty. When his face was a little red, his left hand stopped trembling and pointed at the signal. With a whoosh, the signal rushed to the sky with a long tail behind it and then exploded. 2 huge valley entrances also appeared in the sky.
Go.
With a wave of his hand, Chen Chen did not even bother to adjust his internal energy. He simply scooped the small stone into his arms and led everyone toward the entrance of the valley. In the distance, the yellow figure that was meditating gradually opened its eyes. It looked at the giant beast that was waiting beside it and screamed a few words. The giant beast nodded its head respectfully and sank into the water beside it. The yellow figure raised its head and saw the already small signal in the sky. A trace of anger flashed in its eyes and it immediately moved. Like the wind, it flew towards the east. However, just as it got up, its small figure rolled over and a trace of bitterness appeared on its face. Its 2 small claws slowly touched its stomach. That stomach was slightly bulging. The figure paused in the air for a moment before flying forward at a slightly slower speed. Dragon scale fruit, cold night grass, 1,000 souls wood. Near a low shrub in the east, a group of male and female disciples looked at the mountains and rivers in front of them in disbelief. There were all kinds of spiritual herbs growing there and they exclaimed in surprise. What is this place? Why are there so many herbs growing there? Junior brother Zhao, your decision is correct. We've just arrived and we've already found so many rare herbs. If we go deeper, there will be even more. Senior Sister Xia is too polite. This is the result of our joint efforts. Moreover, I've already roughly looked around and there aren't any fierce beasts here. They must have been lured away by the signal of the inner disciples. We can rest assured and collect them. At this moment, a disciple pointed to the sky in the distance and said, Senior Sister Xia, look, the inner disciples of Lingxiang Peak have sent another signal. Senior Sister Xia and Junior Brother Zhao both raised their heads. At this time, the signal was already far away and they couldn't see anything clearly. However, this already showed that the inner disciples and most of the surviving disciples were already very far away. Senior Sister Xia had some hesitation on her face, but after estimating the distance, she could only discard her hesitation. She turned her head and said, the inner disciples have already gone far away. Even the fierce beasts here have also chased after them. It's time for us to harvest. Once we fill up the carriages, those fierce beasts will probably return. We'll hide for a few more days and go back the way we came. There shouldn't be any danger, right, Junior Brother Zhao? Junior Brother Zhao nodded and said, Senior Sister is right. This is exactly what I was thinking. He then said to the disciples, hurry up and harvest. We still have other places to go. There aren't any fierce beasts in this Yulon Grand Canyon. It's really a great opportunity for us. Zhang Xiaohua and the others naturally saw the signal as well. Lu Chaoxian smiled and said, this signal must be heading towards the exit in the south. It's getting closer day by day. Fortunately, they left from the east while we left from the west. It's cheap. Zhang Xiaohua nodded, that's right. However, we can't be careless. We should hurry up and get out before them. Otherwise, if they go out, the group of beasts might stay at the exit. We won't be able to get out even if we want to. Lu Chaoxian's expression turned cold as he said, Junior Brother Ran is right. After that, he spurred the horse and hurriedly drove the carriage to hurry up. However, even if they hurried, they only arrived at the Yulon rainforest in the afternoon. Looking at the somewhat gloomy rainforest and the dark clouds that were moving above the rainforest, Lu Chaoxian was somewhat hesitant. Before entering the Yulon Grand Canyon, he had already heard from his senior brother that although the Yulon rainforest was unpredictable, it could only be passed through during sunny days. The soil there was dry and there were few fierce beasts. It was the safest place. The last time he came here, it was raining and there was also the protection of the Wuming Hall's disciples. Even so, junior brother Wang was bitten by the five-colored snake and almost lost his life. At this time, it was about to rain. Some of the small beasts in the rainforest were active. It would be difficult to pass through without any accidents. Seeing Lu Chaoxian hesitating, Zhang Xiaohua asked and found out that there was a taboo in the Yulon rainforest. However, looking at the signal of the inner disciples, he still said, "Let's go, senior brother Lu. We are racing against the inner disciples. Their qinggong is good, but the distance is far. Our distance is shorter, but our speed is slower. If we delay any longer, we will be blocked by the fierce beasts at the entrance of the canyon." Lu Chaoxian was speechless and secretly said, "If I knew this, why would I rest at night? Let's just hurry." However, he could only accept Zhang Xiaohua's arrangement. He took out the straw raincoat and other things from the carriage and handed them to Zhang Xiaohua. "He, you are quite well prepared." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and put them on. Then, the carriage rushed into the rainforest. Just as the carriage entered the rainforest, the raindrops fell and the ground gradually became wet and slippery. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly shouted, "Stop the carriage!" Lu Chaoxian was shocked and immediately stopped the carriage. Zhang Xiaohua jumped and landed 3 feet in front of the carriage. She took out a short sword and directly stabbed it into the ground. Then, the ground rolled like waves and stopped after a while. Zhang Xiaohua stood up and said with a smile, "Senior brother Lu, please take a detour. This underground must have been dug out by the carnivorous beast." Lu Chaoxian was stunned and secretly said, How did this junior brother Ren know that there are carnivorous beasts underground? Can he see through the ground?" Lu Chaoxian hurriedly turned the horse around and asked. Zhang Xiaohua only smiled and said, "When one's inner strength is cultivated to a certain level, they will be able to react to the movements in their surroundings. Although these carnivorous beasts are underground, I can still roughly hear them." Before she finished speaking, her figure immediately shot to the back of the carriage. The jade water sword in her hand repeatedly stabbed 4 or 5 five-colored snakes that shot out from the grass. Zhang Xiaohua's movements were very fast. When she skewered the 5-colored snakes on the jade water sword, the few people behind saw it and couldn't help but tremble in fear. Then, Zhang Xiaohua jumped back into the carriage and said to Lu Chaoxian, "For example, I can feel these 5-colored snakes when they shot out." 5-colored snakes? Lu Chaoxian was stunned. When he turned back to look, he almost jumped off the carriage and shouted, Where did you get them?" Zhang Xiaohua spread out her hands and said, "It was just now." Lu Chaoxian sat down again. He was a little confused. He didn't seem to have heard of an outer disciple with such high martial arts. The raindrops continued to fall and seemed to be getting heavier. The carriage traveled for a while and there weren't many accidents. It seemed that the beasts here were all going to stop the inner disciples. Suddenly, the horse pulling the carriage neighed a few times and snorted, refusing to move forward. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. There didn't seem to be anything strange within 10 feet, and there wasn't any warning from her divine sense. Could it be that there was some danger ahead that she didn't notice? Lu Chaoxian turned back to ask Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head slightly, indicating that they should wait first. After a while, they heard a series of pa-ta sounds in front of them. There was actually a group of beasts walking towards them. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and felt a little strange. Why didn't her divine sense anything? But when the group of beasts came closer, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly realized that this group of beasts seemed to be familiar with each other. In front of them were a few short human-faced monkeys and behind them were more than 10 tall giant apes. Seeing the group of beasts gradually approaching, Lu Chaoxian and the rest were already trembling. After all, the giant apes were beasts that could tear apart lions and tigers. Even outer disciples would have a headache if they saw them. Cough cough, it had to be said that Lu Chaoxian always associated the beasts with outer disciples. Their level could only be so low. Zhang Xiaohua, on the other hand, did not panic at all. He crossed his arms and stood quietly in the carriage. When the giant ape and the human-faced monkeys in front of it saw the carriage appear in front of them, they were all enraged. The human-faced monkeys almost jumped up and were about to charge forward. However, they had just charged 3 feet when they saw Xianxia standing high up on the carriage shed. Chapter 655. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua standing high up on the horse carriage, one of the human-faced monkeys immediately stopped and let out a few stern screams. The human-faced monkey that was about to charge forward also stopped immediately and retreated submissively. At this moment, the giant ape behind also seemed to have seen Zhang Xiaohua, and it growled in a low voice and stopped moving forward. Zhang Xiaohua's group was even more unbearable. Lu Chaoxian and the rest's faces were pale and their hands and feet were trembling. They almost wanted to jump off the horse carriage and run away, but their hands and feet were numb. How could they even move half a step? Thus, the 9 people and the group of beasts faced each other in an awkward silence. Only the dense raindrops continued to fall with a pitter-patter sound. Seeing the human-faced monkey and giant ape hesitating, wanting to step forward but not daring to act rashly, the corners of Zhang Xiaohua's mouth curled up into a smile. His figure leaped up and jumped down. Just as he was about to jump in front of the carriage, he heard a poochie sound. The muddy water on the ground splashed up, splashing towards the giant ape. Following that, a schwa sound was heard and the human-faced monkey standing in front was splashed with muddy water. Even the legs of the giant ape beside it were splashed with a lot of muddy water. That human-faced monkey was shocked and immediately jumped back. The giant ape beside it also jumped back. Their movements were not serious, but the human-faced monkey and giant ape who were already nervous were shocked. They screamed and turned around to run. The 2 that jumped back were also shocked and didn't even turn their heads back. They screamed and followed behind, fleeing in a panic. In a moment, kacha and pitter-patter sounds could be heard continuously. They were actually in a panic and bumped into the shrubs and small trees in a mess. Ah? Lu Chaoxian and the rest were stunned on the spot. They really didn't expect that this was actually the end. Everyone secretly thought in their hearts, could this be the legendary, when 2 rivals meet on a narrow path, the courageous will emerge victorious? At this moment, the raindrops above their heads suddenly stopped. It was as if a few years-old baby's face had changed in such a short time. Zhang Xiaohua could still see the back of the giant ape. He somersaulted in the air and directly jumped onto a big tree at the side. Ha ha, he laughed loudly. He had only done it on a whim and wanted to show his strength to the human-faced monkey. Who would have thought that he would actually be so mighty in the giant ape's heart? Even he himself couldn't think of it. After the dark clouds passed, the afternoon sun shone into the dense foliage of the rainforest. The mottled sunlight scattered on the muddy ground, causing some mist to form. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua's face revealed a trace of joy. Just 3 feet away, under a big tree, beside the green vines, a spirit herb with 9 sprouts was blooming. Wasn't this the origin returning grass? According to the 100 Herbs Compendium, origin was the beginning of all living things. 9 was the prosperity of all living things. Origin returning meant to return to the beginning. Origin returning grass grew in damp areas. Every time a new bud grew, it would bloom once. The time it took to bloom was not fixed, but the process was very short. When 9 new buds had grown, the entire origin returning grass would wither and turn into a seed. It would either stay in the same place or go to another place to germinate. Origin returning grass was also famous because of this characteristic. During the first 8 blossoms of the origin returning grass, its medicinal properties were better each time, but it could not be called a real spiritual grass. Only when it bloomed for the 9th time could it be picked and used as a medicine. Therefore, this was the reason why origin returning grass was so precious. When Zhang Xiaohua saw the origin returning grass, she was overjoyed. Lingering Fragrance Peak's inner disciple, Zhang Pinger, had wandered around the Yulon Grand Canyon for a long time, but had not encountered the origin returning grass. She did not expect that she would encounter it not long after arriving in the rainforest. Immediately, Zhang Xiaohua took out a jade box from her bosom and used her qinggong to fly over. In mid-air, she waved her left hand and struck out a spell. The origin returning grass was also strange. The orange-colored Xiaohua slowly bloomed and was about to fully bloom. However, When the spell struck the origin returning grass, the flower immediately froze and did not move. Xianxia's figure landed on the ground and was about to put the origin returning grass into the jade box when she suddenly heard a "susu" sound. A gust of cold wind blew and a strange red snake bit towards Xianxia's finger like the wind.
Red stork snake.
Xianxia was startled and immediately understood. No wonder Zhang Pinger was bitten by the red stork snake. It turns out that the guardian beast of the origin returning grass was the origin returning grass. Zhang Pinger must have found traces of the origin returning grass and was accidentally bitten by the red stork snake. Zhang Xiaohua's thoughts flashed in the blink of an eye. The red stork snake had already bitten her finger. Although Zhang Xiaohua had the antidote, there was no need for her to test the poison with her own body. Therefore, she gently pushed the jade box in her right hand towards the poisonous fangs of the red stork snake. Crack! A sound was heard and the poisonous fangs of the snake were bitten off. Although Zhang Xiaohua's jade box was made of dark green jade, it had been refined by Zhang Xiaohua. The surface was also covered with restrictions, so it was as hard as metal. When the red stork snake saw that the origin returning grass was snatched away, it bit down with hatred and used all its strength. Although its poisonous fangs were tough, they could only be broken at this moment. Without waiting for the poisonous snake to retaliate, Zhang Xiaohua extended her left hand and pinched the snake by 3 inches. With a flick of her hand, she flung the red stork snake away. With Zhang Xiaohua's strength and determination, the red stork snake was like an arrow that left the bow. In the blink of an eye, it was nowhere to be seen. After that, Zhang Xiaohua placed the origin returning grass back into the jade box. Just as she was about to cast another spell, her heart skipped a beat. She retracted her hand and placed the jade box into her bosom. She stood up and returned to the carriage. Lu Chaoxian and the rest had been waiting anxiously for a long time. In this orchid rainforest, they were like lambs that were placed in a pack of wolves. They could be devoured by unknown beasts at any time. When Zhang Xiaohua left, their hearts were filled with apprehension. When they saw Zhang Xiaohua's figure returning, they all stood up from the carriage. Zhang Xiaohua didn't reply. She landed on the roof of the carriage and waved her hand. "Let's go quickly." "All right." Lu Chaoxian and the rest nodded in agreement. They urged their horses to rush out of the rainforest. Outside the rainforest was the pool. Moreover, it was already late. However, this was a critical period and the pool was no longer a safe place. Zhang Xiaohua and the rest didn't dare to stay for too long. They only passed by from afar without stopping at all. Lu Chaoxian discussed with Zhang Xiaohua while driving the carriage. According to him, they shouldn't rest for the night. It was better to rush through the night. However, how could Zhang Xiaohua agree? However, thinking that there was still a campsite ahead, they should be able to reach it before midnight. Therefore, she took a step back and agreed to rest at the campsite with a stone wall. Lu Chaoxian's heart was now as if it had grown wings. As long as he could take a step forward, he would take it. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua insisted, he immediately agreed. Under the starry night, the few carriages sped forward as if they were flying. In the other direction, Chen Chen and the rest also used their qinggong and rushed toward the entrance of the valley. Behind them, there were also a few fierce beasts that followed. In the northeast direction of the Yulon Grand Canyon, the yellow shadow was also flying in the night sky. However, at this time, its speed had slowed down a lot. Its 2 claws were not placed on its abdomen but were gently rubbing it. When it was late at night, it could only look at the dark night sky and sigh like a human. It landed on a place to recover its strength and swallow the moonlight. The moon set and the sun rose. It was a new day. However, today was destined to be an extraordinary day. The morning sun revealed a little side and hid behind the thick dark clouds. This day was a rare cloudy day in the Yulon Prairie. Zhang Xiaohua and the rest came out of the campsite and did not follow the original route. Instead, they went straight near the mountain range on the southwest side. This was originally the territory of a pack of jackals and wolves, but now they must have been attracted by the signal of the inner disciples. Just as Zhang Xiaohua expected, the jackals and wolves were not at home. The other fierce beasts also went to join in the fun. This Yulon Prairie was very quiet. Until late in the morning, they did not encounter any danger. Lu Chaoxian and the rest gradually relaxed. At this speed, they should be able to reach the exit of the Yulon Grand Canyon by tonight. If they were a little faster, they should be able to get out of the jungle. Just when Lu Chaoxian and the rest were admiring Zhang Xiaohua's divine strategy and wonderful foresight, suddenly, they heard a burst of wolf howls coming from the nearby mountain range. Lu Chaoxian and the rest were shocked. Even the horse pulling the carriage was trembling. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and jumped on the roof of the carriage. Her hand shaded her eyes as she looked up the mountain. She saw that in the middle of the mountain forest, there was a woman dressed in white who was using her qing gong to dash forward. Behind her were dozens of fierce beasts that were about the same size as the blood wolves, but their appearance was somewhat different. They were closely chasing after her while howling. Moreover, the steps of the woman in front were already heavy. Occasionally, she would turn around and attack with her sword. However, she was only able to injure a few fierce beasts. She was not able to kill all of them. Instead, this provoked the fierce nature of the fierce beasts and they chased even more closely. Zhang Xiaohua landed and told what she saw. Lu Chaoxian exclaimed, "Jackals and wolves. This is the pack of jackals and wolves. Why didn't they find trouble with the inner disciples? Oh no, this is bad." Zhang Xiaohua didn't have the time to listen to his nagging and complaints. She said in a low voice, "Senior Marshal Brother Lu, keep your head down. Senior Marshal Brother will continue on the previous route. I will go and save that woman. Junior Brother Ren, you don't know that woman. You should come with us. It's just that she's attracting the attention of the wolves." "It's just as well." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Lu, you don't have to say too much. I practice martial arts, but I don't want anything. What use do I have for martial arts when I see a weak girl in danger?" Without waiting for Lu Chaoxian's reply, he leaped down from the carriage and headed straight for the pack of wolves in the distance. Behind him, Lu Chaoxian said innocently, "Junior Brother Ren, look at what you're saying. I just want to go with you." Won't I feel safe by your side?" Chapter 656. Although the white-clothed woman tried her best, she was still unable to break away from the wolves' pursuit. After several hours of pursuit, her internal energy was already exhausted, and she no longer had any strength left to run forward. "Perhaps, I will lose my life here today." The woman used all her strength to jump up a big tree, her hand holding onto a branch as she thought to herself. However, at this time, her mood was extremely calm. She looked up at the sky covered by dark clouds and said to herself, "Tomorrow's sun may be brilliant, but unfortunately, I will not be able to see it." She knew that even if she released a signal for help, the inner and outer sect disciples would not come to her rescue. They were all summoned by the inner sect disciples' signal, and her signal could not be more attractive than the inner sect disciples' signal. Alas, not to mention that the wolves had already surrounded her, and several of them were already trying to climb up the big tree. It was simply impossible for her to release a signal. Looking at the dozens of wolves under the tree, a tall and thin figure appeared in her heart. If only he was by my side, perhaps only his martial arts would be able to save me. While thinking, her gaze turned from the wolves to the incomparably green orchid prairie. Just as she was about to greedily look at the world's beautiful scenery, suddenly, she inconceivably saw that the figure that appeared in her heart had actually run far away. It was flying from the prairie to the mountain range. This isn't a dream, right? The woman looked at the figure in the distance in amazement, and then rubbed her eyes. She then put her hand into her mouth and bit it hard. "Io, this is real, I'm not dreaming. He's here, my Senior Zhang. He's here." Needless to say, this white-clothed woman was the inner sect alchemist disciple Zhang Pinger who was searching for the origin-returning grass in the Orchid Grand Canyon. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's figure, an inexplicable motivation was born from the bottom of her heart. She once again raised her long sword, walked to the side of the tree, and waved her sword to stab several wolves that were about to climb up the tree. Zhang Xiaohua came very quickly. Not long after, she was near. When he saw Zhang Pinger on the big tree, who was looking at him with bright eyes, he couldn't help but be stunned. "Io, what a coincidence. Why did I bump into her again?" Immediately after, he touched his face in panic and thought to himself, "Oh no, why didn't I take out my handkerchief just now? It's too late to take it now. I hope she won't recognize me." But then he thought, She's in danger by herself. If we save her, she'll definitely come with us. She must know that I'm a disciple of the Pill Repository Hall. But how could an ordinary disciple possess such martial arts? Sigh, who knows? Maybe this junior sister Zhang's eyesight isn't good. Seeing that Zhang Ping'er was in danger, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but shout, "Junior sister, hold on!" As soon as she finished speaking, she couldn't help but cover her mouth. Isn't this just drawing legs on a snake? Zhang Ping'er was busy dealing with the wolves. How could she have time to answer him? When the wolves saw that someone had come to help, they immediately split into 10 wolves and charged forward. Zhang Xiaohua took out her jade water sword and suddenly felt that something was wrong. She immediately changed to chasing dream. She flew up and executed the dream-weaving swordplay. Like a wolf in a flock of sheep, she only needed to stab 10 times to leave 10 dark red blood spots on the throats of the wolves. Without waiting for the rest of the wolves to react, she immediately rushed in. She raised her sword, and in the time it took to drink a cup of tea, those wolves were all dead under her sword. Immediately, Zhang Xiaohua was stunned again. Oh no, I killed them too quickly. Isn't my martial arts performance too high? In fact, he had another thought. Lu Chaoxian and the others were at the foot of the mountain. If he showed mercy and a few jackals and wolves ran down the mountain, Lu Chaoxian and the others would suffer. Instead of using the flying sword at that time, it was better to directly show a higher level of martial arts. The person on the tree was also stunned. She knew that this person's martial arts were high, but she didn't expect that he was just a drop in the ocean. She opened her mouth and smiled. Zhang. Just as the word Zhang left her mouth, her vision turned black. Her body went limp and she fell from the tree. Seeing that Zhang Ping'er had fainted, Zhang Xiaohua didn't hold back anymore. He flew over and caught Zhang Ping'er in the air. He immediately transferred his vital energy into her. He knew that Zhang Ping'er had been poisoned last time. Although she was cured in time, her vital energy had been damaged. She had been searching for the origin returning grass for the past few days and her body was already exhausted. Today, she encountered a pack of wolves and forced herself to run for a few hours. She was completely supported by her heart. Now that her mind was relaxed, wouldn't she immediately fall to the ground? After knowing Zhang Ping'er's condition, Zhang Xiaohua was relieved. This kind of illness could be easily recovered as long as she carefully recuperated. Even Rejuvenation Valley's Qi Huang Courtyard could treat her, not to mention the inner disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak. Naturally, Zhang Xiaohua didn't need to do anything unnecessary. Moreover, he also knew that Zhang Ping'er was currently depressed because she couldn't forget about the origin returning grass. He had just picked this spiritual grass yesterday. So what if he gave it to her? After thinking, Zhang Xiaohua placed Zhang Ping'er on his back and used his qinggong to go down the mountain to chase after the carriage that was now a little smaller than before. When Zhang Xiaohua caught up to the carriage, Lu Chaoxian and the others were very happy. When they saw Zhang Ping'er again, they didn't dare to be negligent. They put Zhang Ping'er on the empty carriage and continued forward. After a while, Zhang Ping'er slowly woke up. When she saw that unfamiliar yet familiar face, Zhang Ping'er called out tentatively, "Senior Marshal Brother Zhang?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled. "Senior Marshal Sister Zhang, right? I am Ren Xiaoyao, a disciple of the Grass Division of the Pill Expanding Hall's Tianmu Peak." Zhang Ping'er was stunned and said in disbelief, "Your surname isn't Zhang?" Zhang Xiaohua rubbed his nose. My surname isn't Zhang for the time being." Pfft. Zhang Ping'er almost laughed out loud and immediately coughed again. Zhang Xiaohua said, "Senior Marshal Sister Zhang, you should quickly take some medicine. Your body doesn't seem to be well." Zhang Ping'er smiled bitterly. How could she not know her body's condition? She reached into her bosom and took out a jade bottle. She poured out a brown pill and swallowed it. Zhang Xiaohua was now considered a Qi Huang expert. Just by smelling the pill, he knew that it was the right medicine. It was just that the pill was not refined well. The smell of the medicine was so strong that after a long time, the effect of the medicine would be gone. After a while, Zhang Ping'er asked tentatively, "Junior Brother Ren is really a disciple of the Pill Expanding Hall? His martial arts are so strong?" Zhang Xiaohua waved his hand. "It's just luck, just luck. My family is a hunter in the countryside and is best at catching wolves. These wolves are nothing. How could Zhang Ping'er believe him? It was just that it was inconvenient to refute. After all, from this person's figure, it was the senior martial brother Zhang who had saved her twice. And including this time it was the third time. For a moment, the atmosphere was quiet. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Senior martial sister Zhang, rest for now. In another day, we should be able to reach the entrance of the valley. Let's escape first." "Io, you want to go out?" Zhang Ping'er was shocked and directly ignored the word escape. She struggled to stand up and said, "Why so early? Isn't there still many days? Quick, stop. I still need to pick the origin returning grass. I can't go out now." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He thought for a moment and said, "Senior martial sister Zhang, what is the origin returning grass you want to pick? Why haven't I heard of it in the pill expanding hall?" "Pretend, just pretend." Zhang Ping'er seemed to understand Zhang Xiaohua's meaning. She carefully took out a jade box from her bosom and said, "Senior sister Zhang, after you've talked for so long, I have a rough idea of what guan grass is. To be honest, yesterday I happened to come across an herb that I had never seen before in the orchid rainforest. I picked it casually and wanted to take it back to the pill repository hall to claim credit. Now that you've mentioned it, this herb is exactly the same as what you've described. Look, if this is the guayuan grass you're talking about, then I'll have a great merit. I've heard that our pill repository hall's disciple, Lu Lihong, was able to break into the Wuming Hall with a 300-year-old ginseng. Then I should." Zhang Lihong's face was filled with surprise and disbelief. As he spoke, he revealed a face of envy. How could Zhang Ping'er listen to half a word? She snatched the jade box from Zhang Xiaohua's hand. Her method was so fast that even Zhang Xiaohua was dumbfounded. When Zhang Ping'er opened the jade box, wasn't there 9 sprouts of the origin returning grass inside? Zhang Ping'er looked at the origin returning grass in the jade box and her tears flowed down. She had risked her life just to pick 1 or 2 sprouts of the origin returning grass. This guy actually casually picked 9 sprouts. How could he let others live with his luck? "Thank you, senior martial brother," Zhang Ping'er murmured. "You're welcome, junior martial sister." Zhang Xiaohua casually agreed. She then realized that she had misspoken and quickly covered it up. "Senior martial sister Zhang, in the future, just give me more benefits." Zhang Ping'er's eyes revealed a trace of a smile. Just as she was about to speak, she heard Lu Chaoxian shouting from outside, "Junior martial brother Ren, come out quickly. Look, the inner court disciple released the signal again." "What? Where?" Zhang Xiaohua was also shocked and quickly rushed out of the carriage. Sure enough, in the east, opposite their carriage, there was a huge signal floating in the air. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua could clearly see that there were 2 huge words on the signal, "Valley Entrance." Upon seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua's complexion changed greatly. She shouted, "Senior brother Lu, hurry up. We can't delay any longer. If we arrive at the entrance of the valley later than them, we will be besieged by the herd of beasts." Lu Chaoxian, senior brother Wang, and the others panicked when they heard this. They whipped their horses with all their might, wanting to speed up a little. At this moment, in the far east, another sharp roar rang out. The sound shook the surroundings, and even the dark clouds in the sky were shaken to the point of shaking. There were actually some gaps, and a few rays of sunlight pierced through the air like golden swords. Chapter 657. That indescribable beast roar actually came from the Far East and spread throughout the entire Yulon Grand Canyon. It was definitely appropriate to describe it as a storm. Not only did Zhang Xiaohua's heart palpitate, she could clearly feel the anger in the beast's voice. Even the Dan core in her Naiwan palace slightly jumped. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly activated God Traction, and her heart slowly calmed down. Not to mention Lu Chaoxian and the rest who were already pale. Even Zhang Ping'er was covering her chest with her hands. Her originally pale face had a slight green color. The 4 horses pulling the carriage were even more unbearable. Li li li, after a few mournful cries, their hoofs went soft and they collapsed onto the ground. The galloping carriage also fell onto the ground. Zhang Ping'er followed Zhang Xiaohua out of the carriage. When the carriage toppled over, Zhang Xiaohua leaped up. With one hand holding onto Zhang Ping'er's waist and the other hand holding onto Lu Chaoxian's neck, she lightly landed on the ground. The few disciples behind them were in a miserable state. They all fell out due to inertia. Their faces were bruised and swollen. Even so, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. She quickly put down the two of them and turned around to pull up the 4 horses that were lying on the ground. Although the carriage was damaged, it could still be used. She shouted, "Senior brother Lu, senior brother Wang, quickly get on the carriage. Don't delay. This roar is very strange. We don't know where the beast came from. I reckon that it isn't something that the inner disciples can fight against. They are probably running for their lives towards the entrance of the canyon. Our qinggong isn't good, so we can only rely on these horses. We don't need to be able to outrun the beast, as long as we can outrun the other outer disciples." After she finished speaking, she turned around and helped Zhang Ping'er onto the carriage. When the other disciples heard this, they knew that Zhang Xiaohua wasn't lying. They quickly got on the carriage and urged the horses forward. The legs of the horses that were pulling the carriage were still weak at first. After running for a while, they slowly recovered. Seeing that the carriage had regained its normal speed, Zhang Xiaohua curiously asked, "Senior Sister Zhang, what do you think is going on with that roar? Why did it come out of nowhere? Did it just wake up?" Zhang Ping'er stared blankly and said in confusion, "This should be the 3rd time. A few nights ago, there were already 2 incidents. Could it be that Zhang Junior brother Ren didn't hear it? A few nights ago?" Zhang Xiaohua stared blankly for a moment before her heart skipped a beat. She turned around and asked, "Senior brother Lu, was there such a cry that night?" Although Zhang Xiaohua didn't mention which night it was, Lu Chaoxian nodded with certainty. "Yes, Junior brother Ren, it happened that night. First, there were a few roars, just like today's. However, it seemed like there were 2 monsters. One was in the east, which should be where the business came from, and the other was in the west, which is further west than our Qihua forest. However, today's roar was obviously sharp, so it should have come from the east that night." "I'm absolutely right. The sound came from the west to the east. I can't remember it wrong. That night, not long after the sound stopped, countless ferocious beasts attacked our camp. Our brothers." Lu Chaoxian couldn't continue. What happened to the disciples of the pill-expanding hall? Zhang Ping'er stared blankly when she heard this. Then, she stuck her head out and looked behind her in disbelief. It was as if she had just realized that out of the hundreds of people she saw previously, there were only 9 people left. What about Junior brother Su and the rest? And Junior brother Chen and the rest of the outer disciples? Zhang Ping'er asked in confusion. Looking at the confused Zhang Ping'er, Zhang Xiaohua secretly shook her head. "Sigh, the ignorant are fearless. This inner disciple's martial arts is bad, but her luck is really good. She was saved by me 3 times. Furthermore, it has been so long since the beast tide broke out, but she still hasn't met any particularly strong beasts. Well, it's no wonder. She always looks for remote places to look for energy-returning grass, so the chances of her being discovered by beasts are very low." At that moment, Lu Chaoxian held back the grief in his heart and vaguely told what happened that night. Of course, he only said that he and Zhang Xiaohua were hiding in the cave and saw the tragedy from afar. He didn't tell the truth. Zhang Ping'er was so frightened that she forgot that since Zhang Xiaohua was beside Lu Chaoxian and the rest, why didn't she hear the roar at that time? These 2 roars, are they the legendary yellow wind and black lightning? Zhang Ping'er was a little flustered. Zhang Xiaohua nodded slightly and said, "I think so too. Not only our pill-expanding hall was attacked by the beast tide, but the other outer disciples were also in danger." Then, he told her about the tragic situation he saw when he explored. "So we didn't dare to wait for the Wuming Hall's disciples to escort us in the strange birch forest. I guess they can't even protect themselves." Only then did Zhang Ping'er know that the situation in the entire Yulon Grand Canyon was so dangerous. She was still wandering alone. She broke out in a cold sweat and her heart was full of fear. Then she looked at Zhang Xiaohua, who pretended nothing had happened, and felt a burst of emotions. She carefully touched the jade box that she carefully put in her arms and felt an indescribable feeling. Chen and the others in the distance heard the harsh roar and their legs were also weak. Many people were in the internal breathing channel and had to stop and rest for a while. At this time, most of the inner female disciples she had brought with her had returned. Only 6 disciples were missing. Perhaps they had rushed to the entrance of the valley, or perhaps they were still on the way, or perhaps the outer disciples were even more miserable. There were nearly 40 people gathered here and nearly 30 of them were injured to varying degrees. In the past 2 days, nearly half of them had lost their lives to the attacks of the beasts. In fact, it was not that the inner disciples did not take care of them, but it was true that there were too many beasts. The entire area was a sea of beasts and they could not even keep an eye on them. They could only watch as they lost their lives. Why did this beast go crazy? Chen was very puzzled and the other inner disciples were even more puzzled. After thinking about it, they still couldn't figure out how they had offended this evil beast. However, who could they explain this to? Fortunately, the inner disciples didn't lose many, much less than what the old elders had told them. Chen could also explain to the sect master. It's just that we can't stay here for long. The sooner we reach the entrance of the valley, the sooner we'll be safe. Who knows when this crazy beast will come? This idea happened to coincide with Xianxia's. Hee. Presumably everyone in the Yulon Grand Canyon was thinking this now. Chen stood up, beckoned everyone, and flew forward. The inner sect disciples were all people with profound internal strength, so they followed closely behind Chen. The outer sect disciples, on the other hand, were in trouble. They had been running for a long time and had long exhausted their inner strength. Their physical strength was even more exhausted. Now, they were relying on their fear of death to support themselves. When they saw the inner sect disciples stand up, they also forced themselves to stay alert and used their qinggong to follow behind from a distance. After all, the roar of the beast just now made them tremble with fear. Although they didn't know whether this beast was yellow wind or black lightning, they didn't want to face either. Well, if they couldn't outrun the inner disciples, as long as they could outrun the outer disciples, it would be fine. In the Far East, in a certain valley, a group of male and female disciples stood there in panic. They didn't know what to do. The roar just now was almost like it came from beside their ears, shaking them to the point of dizziness. After a long time, many people couldn't stand still. Senior Sister Xia asked, "Junior Brother Zhao, this? Do we still want to continue? It seems that the beast just now is close to us." Junior Brother Zhao gritted his teeth and said, "Senior Sister Xia, it's already like this, can we still retreat? That beast's target is the inner disciples of the lingering fragrance peak, not us. Even if we run for our lives, we can't outrun the beast." While they were talking, a sudden gust of wind blew in the air. Not far away, a beautiful female disciple pointed a finger at a place several feet above Junior Brother Zhao's head and covered her mouth with her other hand, fearing that she would make some noise. Her frightened face changed. Junior Brother Zhao woke up and looked up. In the air, a faintly discernible yellow shadow had already disappeared into the southern horizon. Yellow wind? Junior Brother Chen was also greatly shocked. His legs were somewhat soft and he hurriedly said, Quickly hide." After that, all the disciples hurriedly ran to the cave not far away. Who knew if there would be a group of man-eating beasts following behind this yellow wind? For a time, on the entire Yulon Prairie, there were 10 people in Zhang Xiaohua's group in the west, driving the carriage as fast as lightning, rushing toward the entrance of the valley. In the east, there were inner and outer disciples led by Chen for dozens of days. They were all using their lightness skills to make a final struggle. Behind Chen, the yellow shadow like the wind chased forward as if it didn't care about its life. Although Chen and the others had started 2 days earlier, they were still more than half a day away from the entrance of the valley. However, the yellow shadow was really like the wind. Even Zhang Xiaohua's imperial wind technique could not compare. After half a day, just in front of Chen and the others, more than a dozen older people came from afar. They were Masters Junior Zhang of Wuming Hall who had been waiting for the pill-expanding hall team at the exit of the Yulon Grand Canyon earlier. They must have also heard the roar of the fierce beasts and the signal of the inner disciples, and rushed over to help. Seeing Chen and the other inner disciples in such a sorry state, they were a little stunned. Chen did not care about them and only shouted, "The disciples of the Wuming Hall are still behind. Hurry up and help them." Yellow wind, or black lightning, were still in the easternmost land in the morning. I don't know where they are now. Yellow wind, black lightning. Although the people who came to help were mentally prepared, their hearts were still beating fast. Martial Uncle Zhang hurriedly said, "As early as 2 days ago, my Wuming Hall sent people to report this news to the Lingxiang Peak. Maybe the sect master and the elders will be coming soon." At this time, Chen Chen had passed them and only shouted, "How can the sect master arrive in 2 days? Go and help your disciples and get out of the valley quickly." Before Chen Chen's voice fell, in the distance behind him, there was another angry roar. The same sound shook the wilderness, but this time, it was less majestic. The horse pulling the carriage on Zhang Xiaohua's side was not paralyzed with fear. Calm. There are more chapters. Chapter 658. In the distance, after the yellow shadow roared, it suddenly fell from mid-air until it hit the treetops on the ground. It flipped a few times and barely managed to stabilize itself in the air. It turned out to be a little beast that looked like a marten. This little beast had yellow fur all over its body. It looked very cute. However, this little beast's tail was extremely large. It was more than twice the size of its body. Its 2 round eyes were as bright as gems. The sharp gaze that shot out from its eyes was filled with a feeling of vicissitudes. At this moment, its eyes were a little moist. There was a faint pain and anger in them. The most peculiar thing was not only its bulging abdomen, but also its 2 small claws that were gently rubbing against each other. There was also a vertical mark between its 2 eyes, faintly opening and closing. From time to time, there was a flash of silver light inside. The little beast paused in the air for a moment. Then, its eyes flashed with determination. It swung its huge tail and its body shot into the air like a bolt of lightning. A series of afterimages flashed past, creating a whirlwind. In the time it took to eat a meal, the entrance of the Yulon Grand Canyon was right in front of them. Chen Chen's heart relaxed a little. He estimated that they would reach the entrance of the canyon in the time it took to brew a cup of tea. At this time, it was almost dusk. However, the sky was covered by dark clouds and not a trace of sunlight could be seen. The twilight was also approaching the night. It was a good time to leave the canyon. Suddenly, there was another low roar. Chen Chen's heart palpitated, and when he looked back unconsciously, there was only a group of inner disciples in palace attire behind him. Then, there was a group of outer disciples who were in a sorry state. Under the support of the elders of the Wuming Hall, they were chasing after them. There were no fierce beasts following them. He looked at Xianxia, who was holding his hand. Her small face was also white and her eyes were full of fear. She seemed to have heard the low roar just now. Therefore, Chen Chen did not dare to delay any longer. He gritted his teeth and mobilized the last bit of internal force in his meridians. His speed increased by 2 notches and he really rushed toward the entrance of the canyon as if he was flying. Seeing that the Yulon Grand Canyon was right in front of them, everyone was overjoyed. These days of running around had finally paid off. However, at this moment, there was a scream behind them, followed by another. At this moment, no one dared to look back. No one dared to slow down even for a moment. Even if it was their own martial brothers, their own martial sisters, who let out tragic cries beside them, no one dared to have any hesitation. All of them used their last bit of strength, used their last bit of internal energy, and charged forward. It was just as Chen Chen thought. At this time, the little beast had already caught up with them. The little beast's eyes shot out a hateful gaze, and with a swing of its huge tail, it flew to the front of an outer disciple. It gently waved its little claw, and the sharp protrusion on its claw tore the disciple's throat. A trace of blood instantly oozed out. The disciple immediately screamed and fell to the ground. His mouth made a hee-hee sound and his body rolled left and right. A grayish-black fine line quickly spread from his throat to the rest of his body as if it had a life of its own. While the disciple was in pain, there seemed to be an unbearable itch. The fingertips of his hands kept tearing at his throat. As a result, the wound became bigger and more blood flowed out. However, in any case, the disciple's mind was still clear. The pain and itch all over his body hit his mind wave after wave. At this time, he only had one thought: to be alive is better than death. After the little beast scratched one disciple, it swung its tail like a gust of wind. It did not stop and it swept toward another disciple's throat, then another. It was not that the outer disciples did not want to resist. They had already pulled out their long swords. Even if it was just a gust of yellow wind, they did not hesitate to stab with their swords. They wanted to save a little bit of life for themselves. However, could a long sword pierce through the wind? Obviously not. Therefore, their sword could only exchange for the bright red blood flowing out of their throats. Several outer disciples tried but failed. The outer disciples and the elders of Wuming Hall did not dare to try again. They just used their qinggong and desperately ran toward the exit of the valley. Everyone thought in their hearts, yes, we can't outrun the inner disciples. However, as long as we outrun most of the outer disciples, we can also safely escape from the claws of the yellow wind. As a result, everyone ran a little faster than usual. However, after running for a while, a few disciples would fall down in pain. In the end, the outer disciples were still no match for the inner disciples. When the little beast wantonly slaughtered more than half of the outer disciples, Chen pulled Xianxia and also rushed to the entrance of the Yulon Grand Canyon. At the same time, in the grassy plains not far away, 4 large horses pulling 4 carriages were also rushing over as fast as lightning. In the leading carriage, a tall and thin figure was holding a short sword as he stood firmly on the carriage's roof. The fierce mountain wind blew his clothes and even his hair was blown to the back of his head. Wasn't it Zhang Xiaohua and the others who wanted to outrun the inner disciples? In the end, it's still too late. Zhang Xiaohua stood on the carriage and looked from afar. He secretly sighed in his heart. This is troublesome. I don't know how we can safely pass through. Now the carriage was still 100 feet away from the entrance of the canyon. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense could not reach it, but his eyes were very sharp. He had already seen that the yellow shadow was slaughtering the outer disciples. Looking forward, it was a group of female inner disciples in palace attire who were frantically fleeing. Wasn't the person he knew at the front, Chen? Why is Chen pulling a girl? Could it be her junior sister? Zhang Xiaohua's eyes naturally saw Xianxia in purple. However, Xianxia was following behind Chen and was rushing to the entrance of the canyon. How could he see her front? Seeing that Chen had rushed to the entrance of the canyon and was just 1 step away from the exit, Zhang Xiaohua was slightly relieved. He didn't know many inner disciples, but he had met Chen once. Of course, he didn't want anything to happen to her. So Zhang Xiaohua lowered his head and turned his head, shouting, "Yellow wind is just ahead. It's slaughtering the outer disciples. Let's ignore it and just rush to the entrance of the canyon. Don't worry, I'm here to keep you safe." Just as Zhang Xiaohua turned his head, Xianxia, who had already reached the entrance of the canyon, suddenly turned her head and looked in the direction of Zhang Xiaohua's carriage. Unfortunately, she only saw Zhang Xiaohua's thin and tall figure and couldn't see his face. She could only sigh in her heart. Oh, which Hall's disciple is this? How could he stand so high? It's a pity that he is doomed to die at the entrance of the canyon. After thinking, she turned her head again and rushed out of the canyon with Chen. After shouting, Zhang Xiaohua also turned his head and saw half of Xixia's face that had just turned away. His heart skipped a beat. However, that face and that figure had already rushed out of the canyon, followed by more female disciples in palace attire. Zhang Xiaohua had no time to think about it. By the time Zhang Xiaohua reached the entrance of the valley, the inner sect female disciples had already retreated. Even the outer sect elders and a small number of elite disciples had also rushed out. Only the outer sect disciples were left on the ground, either dead or alive. Some of them were already motionless, while others were still struggling with all their might. And that small beast like the wind was crazily guarding in the air in front of the entrance of the canyon. It suddenly went up and down, as if venting its anger. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. He held the blue water sword in his right hand and chasing dream in his left hand. He had already released his divine sense and prepared carefully. When Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense approached the small beast, he suddenly found that the essence of the world at the entrance of the canyon was very chaotic. There was a faint irritable atmosphere, which he had never encountered before. What's going on? Does it have something to do with this small beast? Zhang Xiaohua was secretly shocked. While he was thinking, his carriage had already approached the entrance of the canyon. Lu Chaoxian's face was pale and his hands and feet were trembling. Zhang Xiaohua said loudly, "Rush, this is the last moment. Whoever can rush over will be able to get out alive." The small beast was rolling up and down at the entrance of the canyon, glaring angrily at the outside of the canyon. However, it seemed to be afraid and didn't dare to take half a step out of the canyon. Just when the small beast was angry, it heard the sound of horse hooves and carriage wheels behind it. The small beast didn't do anything and immediately faced the charging carriage. Then, without waiting for the carriage to rush closer, it swung its big tail and a shadow flashed past. It directly flew over and raised its sharp claws, aiming for the throat of the coachman, Lu Chaoxian. Lu Chaoxian's face was as pale as before, but he wasn't afraid. It wasn't that he wasn't afraid, but because he couldn't see the shadow of Huang Feng coming over, he didn't know that the small beast's sharp claws were about to tear his throat. Just when the small beast's sharp claws were about to reach Lu Chaoxian's throat, a ray of moonlight flashed at his throat and a light, dang sound was heard. It was precisely the small beast's sharp claws. The usually invincible sword ray only touched the sharp claws of Huang Feng, and actually didn't even leave a scratch. Xianxia was shocked. The small beast was also shocked. Its sure kill attack was actually blocked by someone. This kind of feeling seemed to have happened many years ago. Immediately, a kind of humiliation and a desire to win gushed out from the bottom of its heart. The small beast immediately abandoned Lu Chaoxian and with a flash of its tail, it went for Zhang Xiaohua's throat. Its speed was actually twice as fast as before. Zhang Xiaohua was also careless. She blocked the little critter's claw just now. She thought to herself, "It's only a zozo." By the time the little beast reached him, he was already unable to see its figure with his divine sense. He couldn't help but be alarmed. How can this little mink be so fast? Seeing that the yellow wind was already in front of him, Zhang Xiaohua had no time to dodge. With a flash of inspiration, he tilted his head and fell to the ground. At the same time, he raised the jade water sword in his right hand to protect his face. However, the yellow wind didn't stop at all and continued to descend. Its sharp claws were still aimed at his throat.
"Ayo, what should I do?"
Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. Chapter 659. Just as Huang Feng's sharp claws were about to grab Zhang Xiaohua's throat, a cold light suddenly shot towards Huang Feng's body. It was the Chasing Dream sword that Zhang Xiaohua had prepared beforehand. Chasing Dream was aimed at Huang Feng's slightly bulging abdomen. When Yellow Wind saw this, a look of astonishment appeared in its eyes. Immediately, it did not dare to take the risk. With a swing of its tail, its body moved aside. Immediately, Chasing Dream missed and Yellow Wind's sharp claws paused for a moment, giving Zhang Xiaohua an opportunity to hurriedly use the jade water sword to block Yellow Wind's sharp claws. There was a hint of mockery in the eyes of Yellow Wind. He did not dodge and directly reached for the jade water sword. There was still a dang sound, but this time, there was a huge force pushing towards Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua did not have enough time to react and was forced back a few steps. In the blink of an eye, Zhang Xiaohua and Huang Feng exchanged a few blows. Lu Chaoxian and Senior Wang's carriage had only just passed by. Behind them, there were still two other carriages that sped past them. "If I'm going to save someone, I'll go all the way." Zhang Xiaohua secretly gritted his teeth. Raising the jade water sword in his hand, the sword light flickered as it pierced towards Huang Feng. How fast was Huang Feng? With a slight movement, it dodged. With another flash, it attacked Zhang Xiaohua's throat. "Why is it here again? Can't you change the location?" Zhang Xiaohua was extremely depressed. However, Huang Feng's speed was even faster. He could only vaguely sense the approximate location through his spiritual perception. He did not dare to be careless. He curled up his body and hit his throat between his body. With a roll, he dodged the attack. That Yellow Wind was also strange. It didn't try to grab Zhang Xiaohua's other body parts. When it saw that Zhang Xiaohua had dodged, it turned its head slightly, as if it was looking at the last carriage that had just sped past. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua's spiritual sense was still present. Seeing Huang Feng like this, she was shocked. She knew that it wanted to attack the other disciples, so she made up her mind and formed a seal with her left hand. She pointed at Huang Feng, and Chasing Dream shot out like lightning. This sword had infuriated Huang Feng. He abandoned the carriage and turned around. Leaning forward, he dodged the flying sword and attacked Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua's speed was no match for the yellow wind, and she hurriedly dodged.
She glanced at the entrance of the valley from the corner of her eyes and saw that there was no one there.
There were only 4 horse carriages rushing past the valley. She could vaguely see a fair face looking out from the window of the first carriage. However, that carriage was still some distance away from the entrance of the valley. If the yellow wind turned around, it would only take a blink of an eye. Zhang Xiaohua crawled up from the ground and immediately ran towards the east side of the valley. Huang Feng was stunned. It immediately understood Zhang Xiaohua's intention. It swung its tail and flew forward, following Zhang Xiaohua's figure. However, it was blocking his path to the entrance of the valley. Then, its sharp claws shot out again. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly dodged. This time, the sharp claws almost brushed past her throat. In an instant, cold sweat broke out on Zhang Xiaohua's back.
This won't do.
If I get too close to Huang Feng, it will grab my throat sooner or later. Immediately, before Huang Feng could reach out with its sharp claws, she suddenly turned around and ran towards the direction of the orchid prairie. This action was out of the yellow wind's expectations. In an instant, she had increased the distance between them. Huang Feng hesitated for a moment. The horse carriages had just reached the entrance of the valley. If it went over now, it should still be able to kill a few people. However, at this moment, the chasing dream small sword attacked again. This time, it slightly bulged its abdomen. This time, Huang Feng became anxious. With a low hiss, it increased its speed and chased after Zhang Xiaohua. In a short moment, it was behind Zhang Xiaohua. It immediately stretched out its claws and clawed at the back of her neck. Although it was still sunset, thick clouds covered the sky and the sky was already dark. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to hide her strength anymore. She made a hand sign and flew with the wind. Just like Huang Feng, her body floated in the air, trying to avoid the fatal claw just now. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua could fly with the wind, Huang Feng was shocked again. Its eyes flashed with a trace of seriousness. Its body slightly stopped in the air, as if it was calculating something in its heart. At this moment, Lu Chaoxian's horse carriage had already rushed out of the valley entrance. Senior brother Wang's horse carriage was in the middle of the valley entrance. Zhang Xiaohua's heart was at ease. She smiled and said, "This dear friend, this Xiaoxia won't play with you anymore. You can exercise here by yourself." After saying that, she made a hand sign and her body fell like a stone. She was actually going to use the earth escape technique to escape to the entrance of the orchid prairie. However, when Zhang Xiaohua's feet landed on the ground and she made a hand sign, the green light shield couldn't sink into the ground. It just stood there foolishly. The surrounding ground was actually restricted and she couldn't use the earth escape technique. In the air, Huang Feng looked down from above, as if it was extremely mocking.
"Ayo, this is bad."
Zhang Xiaohua's expression changed greatly. He had already planned to run to the side and attract the attention of Huang Feng. It wasn't that Zhang Xiaohua didn't want to fly back. It was just that Huang Feng had a tight defense and its speed was faster than Zhang Xiaohua's. He didn't dare to meet force with force. Occasionally, he would attack with his sword, but it would only touch the sharp claws. By the time he withdrew his sword, the sharp claws were already in front of him. Even if he wanted to withdraw his sword, it would be too late. In the end, Zhang Xiaohua didn't attack. Seeing that the valley entrance was far away, Zhang Xiaohua secretly took out the dragon binding bracelet from his chest. This was his last trump card. Zhang Xiaohua continued to fly forward without even looking back. Huang Feng did not suspect anything and chased after Zhang Xiaohua. Just as he was about to catch up to Zhang Xiaohua, 2 rings with a faint red glow descended from the sky and wrapped around Huang Feng's slender neck. Huang Feng was clearly stunned. His eyes were filled with fear as his body froze in midair. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, he was overjoyed. The dragon binding bracelet didn't wrap around Huang Feng's neck. It only swayed in front of Huang Feng, scaring Huang Feng into flying backward. Zhang Xiaohua took the opportunity to chase after it. Unfortunately, after chasing for a while, Huang Feng became suspicious when it saw that the dragon binding bracelet didn't wrap around Zhang Xiaohua's neck. When Zhang Xiaohua was feeling pleased with himself, it suddenly turned around and attacked Zhang Xiaohua's throat. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. He pointed his finger and the dragon binding bracelet fell with a swoosh sound, landing on Huang Feng. Just as the dragon binding bracelet got close, Huang Feng swung its tail and dodged to the side. The dragon binding bracelet missed. Zhang Xiaohua activated his divine sense and chased after it again. I've already mentioned this before. I'll reiterate that the next book is actually the second volume of this book. Zhang Xiaohua will still be the main character. However, the name might have to be changed. I haven't thought of it yet. DVS provided Huan Yichen. I think it's pretty good. If anyone has a better name, please suggest it in the comment section or QQ group 1148050076. Thank you. Oh right. Zhang Byron is just an inconspicuous foreshadowing. On one hand, it's to give Zhang Xiaohua the forbidden spirit. On the other hand, I might write about him in the future. I haven't arranged any scenes with him yet. Recruitment Kai Shi once posted a thread asking about the meaning of being an outsider. I guess I didn't explain it clearly. Sorry. If the results of this book are good, I'll write it directly. It'll be the second volume. Unfortunately, the results aren't good. I didn't get promoted, I didn't get promoted, I didn't get promoted, and after VIP, I didn't get promoted at all. So, if I write another 1 million words, I'll have 20,000 bookmarks. Naturally, I don't need to start a new book. Otherwise, I can only pretend to be inexperienced and start a new book. Does everyone understand? However, this book only has 3,000 bookmarks now. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much. Please vote monthly, recommend, bookmark, tip, thank you. Chapter 660. The little beast, Huang Feng, flew at an extremely fast speed. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense wasn't able to detect it. Hence, even with the dragon binding hoop, he couldn't catch up to Huang Feng at all. Not to mention, he couldn't trap Huang Feng. After dodging for a while, Huang Feng seemed to have noticed something amiss and continued to approach him. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to continue running. Behind him, there were two light red hoops that were like little tails that swung back and forth from time to time. He didn't know how long he had been running. The sky was already completely dark and he couldn't see where he was running to. In his divine sense, the surrounding yuan qi was no longer as chaotic as before. Zhang Xiaohua was chased by Huang Feng again and had no choice but to try to burrow through the ground again. Luckily, he successfully burrowed into the ground this time and headed back to the entrance of the valley. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua disappear into the ground, Huang Feng didn't seem to be surprised. With a swing of its tail, it leisurely followed Zhang Xiaohua in the air. It seemed to be able to see Zhang Xiaohua's figure as he burrowed underground. After a while, the crack between Huang Feng's eyebrows opened slightly and a silver eye appeared. The eye stared at the ground and gradually moved forward. After a while, the eye opened again and a faint silver light shot into the ground and penetrated into the ground. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua, who was burrowing through the ground, was pleased with himself. As the saying goes, skills don't weigh down one. I've just learned the earth escape and fire escape. When I have the chance in the future, I'll learn the other escape techniques. Look, although Huang Feng is powerful, didn't this Xiaoxia escape from it? The light silver ray shot into the ground and pierced the green light barrier around Zhang Xiaohua. Immediately, the light barrier burst like a bubble and Zhang Xiaohua's figure was pushed out from the ground by the strong pressure. Before he could regain his senses, his body was naked in front of Huang Feng's mocking eyes. It's broken. Zhang Xiaohua screamed in her heart. Without thinking too much, she turned around and fled in the opposite direction of the yellow wind. Needless to say, that direction was definitely the depths of the Yulon Prairie. With one running and the other chasing, Zhang Xiaohua lost her sense of direction. She only felt that the yellow wind was about to catch up, so she immediately changed directions and continued to fly. After changing directions a few times, Zhang Xiaohua, who had a terrible sense of direction, was completely lost. Of course, this was not what Zhang Xiaohua was most worried about. Although it was very dangerous for him to hide here and there, he could still avoid the attack of the yellow wind. His life was not in danger for the time being. What he was most worried about was that the night was getting deeper and deeper. It was almost midnight, and he would inevitably fall asleep. At that time, he would have no strength to resist at all and would be completely played with. Perhaps when midnight came, it would be the time for him to lose his life. Suddenly, Xianxia raised his head and looked at the pitch-black night sky without a moon or stars. The strange thing was that there was no image of anyone in his mind. Then the image of the purple figure that Chen held hands with in front of the Yulon Grand Canyon at sunset flashed in his mind, as well as half of her face that could not be seen clearly. Who is this person? It's really strange. I thought I would think of mother, father, or the others. At the very least, Xiaoming and little Yuer. However, there was no time for him to think carefully at this time. With a thought, he hurriedly took out 2 origin stones from his bosom, formed a hand seal, and directly fled underground. After forming the hand seal, Zhang Xiaohua immediately disappeared from the ground. A light green barrier enveloped him and he sank into the ground. After that, Zhang Xiaohua sat cross-legged, and just as he circulated the carefree heart sutra in his body, he immediately fell into a deep sleep. In the night sky, endless starlight immediately penetrated through space and entered Zhang Xiaohua's body. When Huang Feng saw that Zhang Xiaohua had burrowed into the ground again, he could not help but feel astonished. His 2 black eyes were filled with ridicule and the slightly cracked silver eye in the middle opened again. However, when he saw that Zhang Xiaohua had burrowed into the ground and was cultivating cross-legged, the ridicule in his eyes gradually disappeared and was replaced by astonishment. Just as Huang Feng's silver eyes were about to shoot out a silver light, they seemed to have seen something unimaginable and suddenly opened wide, revealing the entire eye. This was an eye that was similar to a human's eye. However, the only difference was that the entire eye was filled with silver. The entire eye was silver and did not contain the slightest bit of emotion. If one were to observe carefully, the silver eye seemed to be as deep as the ocean. In this endless ocean, there seemed to be an endless amount of fluorescent light. These fluorescent lights were like specks of stars that slowly rotated into a tiny whirlpool. The depth of the whirlpool could not be determined, and it was as though it could suck one's mind into it. The silver eye was revealed and stared at Zhang Xiaohua for a long time. When it raised its head, it looked at the starlight that was projected onto Zhang Xiaohua's body. It seemed to be able to see through the starlight that was invisible to the human eye. Following which, the silver eye closed, revealing a faint trace. At this moment, a trace of surprise appeared in Huang Feng's eyes. Soon after, it floated in the air above Zhang Xiaohua, who was burrowing into the ground. The projected starlight also happened to envelop Huang Feng's small body. Huang Feng's posture was very strange. It was as though a person was lying down and its slightly protruding abdomen was completely exposed under the starlight. Quite a bit of the starlight that was projected from afar was actually absorbed by Huang Feng's abdomen. Just like this, a strange scene appeared. In the entire pitch-black Yulon prairie, in a remote area, a mink-like little beast was floating at a low altitude, revealing its slightly bulging abdomen. It quietly stopped there, and on the ground below it, a tall and thin young man was sitting cross-legged. Endless starlight was lingering around him, and he was cultivating without any distractions. The next day, although Zhang Xiaohua, who was hiding underground, did not see the first ray of sunlight, he still woke up on time when the projected starlight disappeared. At the same time, Huang Feng also opened the silver eye between its brows. When it saw that there was no more starlight in the surroundings, it immediately looked down. Then, a ray of silver light shot out and chased Zhang Xiaohua out of the ground. Zhang Xiaohua did not have the time to think about how he managed to escape with his life last night. In front of his eyes, the sharp claws of Huang Feng flashed with a cold light. Well, he did not even have the time to brush his teeth and wash his face before he had to escape. However, from then on, his escape was ambiguous. Although Huang Feng blocked Zhang Xiaohua's escape route and did not allow him to escape towards the Yulon Grand Canyon's entrance, it did not want to close in step by step like it did on the first night. It only wanted to rip apart Zhang Xiaohua's throat with one claw. Instead, its speed was slightly slower than before. It was only slightly faster than Zhang Xiaohua's Imperial Wind technique by 3 times. It was able to keep up with Zhang Xiaohua, but it was able to give Zhang Xiaohua a chance to catch his breath and not to be killed in an instant. Zhang Xiaohua continued to flee like this for 3 days, and he was gradually forced from the entrance of the valley to the easternmost part of the Yulon Grand Canyon. These 3 days were the most exhausting Zhang Xiaohua had ever experienced since he started cultivating the way of immortality. He didn't know that Huang Feng had already shown him some mercy, and was only blindly fleeing, trying to think of ways to escape from the sharp claws of Huang Feng. As a result, his somewhat rusty Imperial Wind technique gradually reached a state of proficiency in these 3 days. If it wasn't for the fact that his body's Zhen-Qi was limited, he reckoned that it would have reached the great accomplishment stage. Of course, until now, Zhang Xiaohua still did not know why Huang Feng did not make a move when he was unconscious at night. Even when he tried to use the earth escape technique during the day, Huang Feng still did not hold back and pulled him out from the ground. However, seeing that Huang Feng had somewhat slowed down, Zhang Xiaohua had a pensive look on his face. This Huang Feng came from the extreme west to the extreme east, and then from the extreme east to the entrance of the canyon. Now that he has chased me for a long time, his physical strength must be exhausted, right? In particular, during the process of chasing Zhang Xiaohua, Cucumber would occasionally roll in the air, as if he was in great pain. This made Zhang Xiaohua believe in his own judgment. On this day, Zhang Xiaohua was chased by Huang Feng to a mountain range. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the tall mountain beside her and an idea came to her mind. Other than the Imperial Wind technique and the Earth escape technique, I also have the Fire escape technique. The Imperial Wind technique is no match for Huang Feng, and the Earth escape technique was broken by him. I don't believe that this fellow is not afraid of magma. After thinking, she flew towards the tall mountain. Huang Feng found it strange and followed behind her. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua arrived at the peak of the tall mountain. However, what made Zhang Xiaohua dumbfounded was that there was indeed something on the peak of the mountain. However, it was only a small pool. Where was the magma? She did not know how to use the water escape technique, and she did not even know how to swim. What was the use of a pool? After taking a look, Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly flew down the mountain. At this moment, Huang Feng did not give Zhang Xiaohua any chance to catch her breath. His figure flashed and grabbed at Zhang Xiaohua's throat. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was a little angry. This fellow, he has been chasing me for 3 days. Although there were many dangers, I managed to avoid them all. He must know that he can't kill me. I don't even know who is the one who provoked you, and I don't even know what is going on. Why do you keep pestering me? Moreover, no matter what happened, you have killed so many disciples of the fragrant religion. And you even incited the vicious beasts in the Yulon Grand Canyon to eat so many ordinary disciples. You should stop now. Thus, she stopped running down the mountain and took out the dragon binding hoop from her bosom. She directly put it on Huang Feng. In the past few days, Zhang Xiaohua frequently used the dragon binding hoop while being chased by Huang Feng. Now that she had mastered it, it immediately turned into a ring of light and flew towards Huang Feng. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.